That's great. Okay. Good luck.
Okay, thank you. In theory, I'm here all the time, but every now and then something intervenes. Yeah, I'm keeping my distance.
Okay, I would like to call the council meeting to order. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Ms. LeBreau.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Ms. Casperson.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge.
Here.
Ms. Hall.
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Winograd.
Here.
And Mr. Williams.
Here.
We're going to just do number 4, Mr. Davidoff, and then we will go to our guests.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of the Town Council minutes of the meeting of the 4/17/2017, the minutes of the public hearing concerning the budget fiscal year 2017-2018 on 4/5/2017, and the minutes of the public hearing concerning ordinance defining food trucks and food truck parks 3/28/2017.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to now step away from the agenda for a minute because we have some special guests with us today. I had the honor of having lunch with our guests, who are actually from Open World Leadership Center in coordination with the Rumsfeld Foundation. And I'm just going to give you a little background, and if I'm incorrect, I'm sure I will be corrected. So, Open World Leader Center is an independent government agency of the United States and is in the legislative branch. It administers the Open World Program, an exchange and partnership program designed to enhance understanding and cooperation between the Congress, American communities, and global leaders. The Open World Program builds upon that groundwork for enduring cooperation, bringing emerging government and civic leaders to the United States to work with their American counterparts. This is a little bit unique. We have a Hartford Friendship Force, and Betty DeAngelis and Rena Miller both have led this for 40 years, did I hear you say at lunch, Rena? Something like that. And they have done multiple sponsored groups and hosted people in their homes. And what they have found and said is that when people live together, they learn together, and we are exposed to other cultures, and it is a really enriching experience. And this particular group is again with the Rumsfeld Foundation, who they're staying a little bit longer. I think it's typically a 7-day program, and you're part of a 6-week program. And so they've traveled around the United States, well, a little bit around the United States, but in D.C., I think you spent quite a bit of time in D.C., and then you were in Bloomfield last night at their town council meeting, too. I'm just going to introduce... Actually, Samir, I'm going to just say a couple words about everybody, and then you can go ahead. So we have Mr. Hamad Saburi from Afghanistan. He is the founder and CEO of Strategic Analysis for Peace and Stability. But what was interesting, we were talking to Mr. Saburi before, and he actually was the counterpart to General McMaster when he was in Afghanistan in 2010. So quite a remarkable legacy. And his wife is a diplomat in Indonesia, so amazing. We have Mr. Samir Mamadov, is a chief, I apologize if I said that wrong, is a chief sales officer at NAR Mobile, and he's from Azerbaijan, and he will, I'm sure, tell you a little bit more about himself. We also have Colonel Grigol Chiliz, see, I'm going to say this wrong. George, there, yeah, George from Georgia, right? Commander of the NATO Georgia Joint Training Force and Evaluation Center, a Ministry of Defense of Georgia. Mr. Aman Tentadyev from Kyrgyzstan is the founder and managing partner at the IT investment company, the Farm and Investment Group Avanta Capital. And Mr. Akmal Asov from Tajikistan is the CEO and co-founder of Nurafso Medical Group and has 5 innovative medical centers in Tajikistan. And then I think I'm missing one more. Yes, Mr. Laziz Kudratov from Uzbekistan is the CEO of a Semina project, an IT-based company developing online marketing place for connecting local professionals with customers. Very, very interesting group of entrepreneurs, businessmen. So, Samir, would you like to come up and say a few words? And then I have a little gift for you.
Thanks very much. Honorable Council, Madam Mayor, dear constituency, I won't take much of your time. I know you have a long agenda today, and one particular item that you're hoping will allow you to get home tonight. I'd like to make just 3 remarks, three points on about our 3-day, unfortunately short stay here, and you were absolutely right. Normally, an open world program would be 5 to 7 days. We're here with the Rumsfeld Foundation for 6 weeks, and unfortunately, only 3 days of which are in Connecticut. In fact, the other part of the group is in Iowa right now, but the Iowa comparison to what the Iowa group writes, it is nothing even to compare. So, we already spent 3 to 6 weeks in Washington, D.C., and we certainly almost figured out what they do in Washington, how the Washington politics works, how the Washington works, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating experience, from a standpoint of a very, very mature democracy, and and the capital of the United States and all the political processes there. I think partly the openness of the politicians in Washington, but David Sumbuds' fantastic job on the Rumsfeld side. We've really accessed a lot and got found those shortcuts to get up to date on the Washingtonian life. One thing I think all the fellows would agree that we couldn't figure out is what makes America a great country, because despite everything we saw in Washington D.C., we understood how it works, but it wasn't clear what makes it great. In past 3 days, having visited Hartford, the shipyard in Mystic, and the passionate people there that are basically the last guardians of this craftsmanship. The Hooker Brewery. Now we weren't sure about the name, but the brewery in itself was. Again, the Kurt's passion for what he does. The butler in the Mark Twain's house. These people and these associations, I think, answered our question: what makes America great? Yeah, and we will definitely take that message to Washington D.C. Second thing was that that impressed most of us was. Twofold. One, how consistent and aligned hospitality in Hartford is. First couple of days, we thought it was rehearsed. Yeah? Different disciplines, different ranking people, business, private sector, are giving you the same message. And we want you here. We want your business here. We want you here. Yeah, and I was the first one, I'll take the credit, but yesterday and today, more and more fellows are actually considering moving part of their businesses to Hartford. I won't name it. I think you could imagine what town in particular. But we have now a series of meetings to seriously look into an opportunity of at least symbolic presence in Hartford. Lastly, we represent 6 countries, and I think Hartford and Connecticut, with confidence, has done a great job in securing that we will go back and take a very, very warm message from about Hartford and Connecticut to our major businesses, to our governments. Of that, you can be sure. You are a fantastic community, just unbelievable. Thanks very much.
We're not going to let you forget us.
Okay.
You're coming back and opening your business. So we have 6. You'll have to pay extra for your luggage.
They were just sitting there. Thanks.
Okay. It's
Thanks.
so nice.
Thanks
Thank
very
you for
much.
coming. Yes,
Thank you.
okay. Right, number 5, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item number 5 is an application on behalf of Seritage SRC Finance LLC, owner and applicant of 1445 New Britain Avenue. Susan A. Hayes, attorney, request to amend Special Development District Number 6, the former Sears building, to accommodate facade and signage layout modifications. I move we set for public hearing on June 13, 2017 at 7:15 in the Legislative Chamber and refer to TPZ and DRAC.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we are going to move items 6, 7. Oh, I'm sorry. We have that's right. We have an item for suspense because I'm not involved here. So I make a motion that we introduce a resolution on suspense authorizing the amendment of the purchase and sale agreement between the Town of West Hartford and the University of Connecticut.
A second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carry, I shouldn't move it. You should
Nope.
move it.
Nope. I just-
Suspense, right.
I just
moving
wanted
this.
to point out, you actually have to suspend 2 rules for this
Okay.
one, because your rules state that, except for items like the item you just set for public hearing,
Mm-hmm.
you're only allowed to hear budget items at this meeting, so you have to suspend that rule as well, so just so that the record's clear.
First, I'm going to flip the motion anyway. That was the wrong thing to do. I'd like to make, I'd like to request a motion to suspend the rules, to allow us to introduce a non-item, a budget item for this evening.
Madam Mayor, I move that we suspend the rules to take up an item that does not concern the town's fiscal budget, and that would be the first item for suspense.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries, and now,
Madam Mayor, I would move that we take up and move to adopt a resolution. Or do I have to suspend first?
No, you already did.
Okay. So I move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the amendment of the purchase and sale agreement between the Town of West Hartford and the University of Connecticut.
motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor, and I am abstaining.
Aye.
Aye, so I'm abstaining, right?
This is still the suspense.
Right,
This is-
I'm- Okay. Motion carries. Okay, now, Mr. Davidoff, the resolution. I think that was, the second motion was to adopt the resolution.
So, but we're going to discuss it. We're not
Yes.
just going to go to vote on it.
Right. Okay.
So the understanding, I just want to make clear, is that we just basically suspended the rules to allow us to discuss an item that has been moved to adopt. Okay. And then we'll get to a vote on the adoption.
Go ahead.
Okay. So so everyone's clear what we're doing, let me just read what the resolution says so that we have a general understanding so people who are watching at home might understand. It says, whereas the University of Connecticut owns approximately 58 acres in West Hartford on the north side of Asylum Avenue at the intersection of Trout Brook Drive, and whereas the town and the university entered into a purchase and sale agreement on July 11, 2016, for the town to purchase the property, and whereas as part of that agreement, the town conducted a variety of studies of the property, including investigating the site's physical characteristics, testing for environmental concerns, and remediation demolition costs, and whereas the results of said studies led to further negotiations between the parties, now therefore be resolved by the Town Council of West Hartford that the town manager is authorized to enter into an amended purchase and sale agreement for the purchase of the University of Connecticut's West Hartford campus for $1 million. And be further resolved that the additional purchase price provision in the purchase and sale agreement shall expire on October 1st, 2026. So that's the resolution before the council this evening. Mr. Van Winkle, maybe you can add some more clarity.
Sure, I'm certain you all know exactly about this property and the work we've done that. We've talked about our research into this property at the committee level multiple times. If you go back more than a year ago, the university had a discussion with a private buyer looking to purchase this property. At that time, they were talking $14 million. Obviously, that was very early in that discussion. That Breyer stepped away. You authorized me with a similar resolution some time ago to purchase this property for up to $5 million. Since that time, the governor's budget came out, and that had a significant fiscal impact on the town. And we decided to tell the university that we needed to wait until we understood the impact of the governor's budget on the town before moving forward. I continued to have discussions with the university about options, about adjustment in price, how we might be able to buy this. And the university, through those discussions, has indicated that they would consider a purchase price of $1 million for the 58 acres of land. So if you were to pass this resolution tonight, the Board of Trustees of the university tomorrow is meeting and could consider this offer from the town manager right now to purchase the University of Connecticut's site in the town of West Hartford for $1 million. We have already paid them $250,000. That $250,000, if we chose not to purchase this property, would be theirs. We would lose that money. So in essence, we're talking about $750,000 of additional dollars. Our discussion with them would be that $750,000 would be due and payable at the closing, which would be in October when they vacate the site finally. So we would come back to you once we have an agreement with the university. We would come back to this council with a purchase and sale, a need to authorize the $750,000. We have the means of purchasing this property, that $750,000, with two different ways. One, we could bond for it. It's a purchase of land, so that's certainly something we could bond for. And if we were to do that, that would take the town council to appropriate that bond money. The second would be that last year we set aside $750,000 from our previous year's budget for the potential payment of a second payment to the university of the $5 million. That money set aside in our CNRE account continues to be there. If you could decide to reach back and utilize that money we set aside also to pay for the final payment for this project. That would also have to come, even though it's we have discussed using those funds for this purchase, that would still have to be appropriated by the town council at a future meeting for that purpose. So this resolution tonight continues to authorize me to move forward with negotiations, but it will still come back to you with a final negotiation and the need to appropriate funds for that purchase.
Thank you, Mr. Van Winkle, for the explanation. Are there any comments on the resolution? Mrs. Hall?
I do have comments, but first of all, could you explain the final, be it further resolved that the additional purchase price provision in the purchase and sale agreement shall expire on October 1st, 2026?
As you remember, from the first discussions we had, the university had proposed a clawback in this. They were concerned that they were selling the land under market value. And if we were to flip it in real estate terms to someone for a higher price, our agreement when we were discussing $5 million was that the university would get 90% of that additional value out of the property. In the case of the $1 million, that factor is still in there. It would expire if we held this property until October 1, 2026, then there would be no clawback on that.
Thank you. I think it also would make sense just to point out for our audience that the mayor has recused herself from all of these discussions because of a conflict with UConn, in case that isn't out there. So I would like to say at the beginning when this was first contemplated and this opportunity first came our way, that I did vote in the affirmative to have the manager go out and begin negotiations. I thought it was an interesting idea. I thought it had the potential to change, the shape of the future of our town, and it was right for us to explore it. But I think a lot has happened over, the last year or so that this came up, including the governor's budget that creates havoc with our own budget. I actually think some of the articles that have been in the Hartford Courant really get to some of my own issues. In a March 16th issue, our West Hartford Deputy Corporation Counsel Kimberly Bonham writes that it's proving to be a difficult decision to buy the property because of the cleanup costs. Originally, we were looking at the $11 million to buy the property, demolish the buildings, clean up the soil to residential standards, so the money to take down the buildings. So now instead of that, we're looking at $7 million. But that also doesn't include any of improvements that we might make to the fields. That's all from the current. We also had our staff spend a lot of time looking at what would be the different opportunities with the building, what would be the costs associated with either occupying it or keeping it vacant. None of those projections include the cost of insurance. So, according to the letter that Assistant Corporation Counsel wrote, the projected annual cost would be over $315,000. It would cost $215,000 just to maintain the buildings and another $100,000 to maintain the land. This includes the utilities, minimal heat to keep pipes from freezing, etc. If we were to try to use these buildings, we would have to spend approximately $4.5 million in repairs because the state has deferred maintenance on the buildings for a long, long time. The annual cost to use the buildings, $825,000. So these are big numbers. I point this out just because it sounds intriguing. We could buy 54 acres for $1 million. But it doesn't stop there. There's lots of costs that go on and on. Part of the studies that the town did turned out that we need stormwater improvements in the area that would cost $4.75 million to do. At this point, I don't know who bears the cost of those improvements. So I appreciate the idea that $1 million is a lot less than the $5 million, but we're still at the point tonight where we have no idea what the state budget is going to do. We don't know. Every day, it's a different story in the paper. They're going to do this, they're going to give us money, they're going to take money away. Doing this budget is impossible. Our town manager's own comments in the Current was saying, when we're standing here thinking about, well, do we have to lay off teachers? Do I have to lay off police officers? I can't just buy a park. The driving force is we have some serious financial problems that we need to be cautious about spending additional money when we're losing $14.5 million of state assistance. This was from an article when the governor's first budget came out. So these are some of the things that our own staff and town manager have said about, is this now the time to take on all of these additional costs? We also learned, per the April 6th Current article, state regulators say Yukon officials violated state law regarding the cleanup of toxic polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs, at the 58-acre West Hartford campus. Yukon maintains this was a procedural misunderstanding, but Deep's statement is troubling to me. So, quote, Lori Salaby, a Deep supervising environmental analyst in charge of storage tanks and PCB enforcement, said that based on soil samples at the campus, it's pretty clear that PCBs have migrated around the campus. Salaby said Deep has not collected its own samples from the site, but has visited the campus once a week to monitor progress. Testing has indicated a high level of PCBs in window caulking in one of the buildings. The article goes on to say, the supposition is that there's a high likelihood that other windows in that building might have been installed in the same time using the same material. There's 3 buildings on campus that were constructed in the same time frame, and so potentially they may all have similar problems, but at this point they have just got into it. They only know of the one window right now and some additional material in the ceiling. Some fell inside the ceiling tiles. When PCBs hit the levels found in the window caulk, Salaby said, indoor air is often impacted. The article continues to say, I would say we've definitely been concerned because what we found with other schools is when you have levels of PCBs in building materials as high as what they found in this particular window, you start to have concentrations of PCBs in the air. And we've seen at other schools where caulk with this types of numbers will produce air samples that are above what people should be exposed to. This doesn't sound like a prime time to buy this building. I think, Ron, you've also compared this to a white elephant. If we were to buy this property, we will need to engage specialized attorneys. We've already engaged an environmental attorney. This is going to be a very complicated real estate transaction, including those clawbacks that the manager just explained. I know we've got a few attorneys. I would not hesitate to guess that that's going to be more than $500 an hour for this type of specialized work. And it could be a lot of hours going into this. So back to that 1 million, it sounds good, but these projections don't include those hours of legal work. And furthermore, I have no way of really knowing, and I haven't heard anyone assure us that there's a way to successfully indemnify West Hartford from any future health claim. So right now the state is doing remediation work to bring it to an acceptable industrial use, but then if we wanted to use it for recreational or residential, we would have to do even more. So then, some point in the future, if there's a claim, how do we determine whether it was our fault because we didn't do something to bring it to the correct residential, or whether it was the state's? That, I believe, is all going to be something that has to be nail down in the legal documents. You know, if we get that wrong, you know, what is that future liability? So now again, according to the current, UConn plans to lay landscaping fabric and mulch over PCB areas on April 14th. Will remove a window with window caulking, and will produce reports on air sampling later this month. So I don't believe we've received those reports yet on what they found in the air sampling. Why would we want to buy this property before we've gotten the results of those reports? The Current also said that in late March, DEEP also contacted town officials and the health director about a significant environmental hazard at the campus. I haven't heard anything about that discussion. So with this many uncertainties between the budget and not knowing what we have to work with, and I just don't think it would be responsible for the town to take on the costs of this property right now. I also don't think we need to, because we have the power of zoning. Any developer who wants to look at this property is going to want to work with the town. It's zoned residential with education of permitted use. The area educational facilities haven't expressed any interest, and frankly, probably none of them have the $6 million to either take down the buildings or would want the liability of dealing with the PCBs. I actually think it's ironic because over the last 8 years that I've been on the council, I don't know how many times we've carved out a little portion of town land and tried to find a way to either give it away or sell it just so we could step away from the costs of maintaining that property. So meanwhile, we're saying, but let's take on the costs of maintaining this contaminated 58-acre parcel of land. Now, a few weeks ago, there was a majority of the council members in a meeting, and all of the members from both parties walked through all of this information, and we walked through, you know, the costs of dealing with taking down the buildings and how that cost makes it unattractive for any real estate developer to take on this project because it's just uneconomical for them to pay this amount per parcel to then develop single-family homes. Every one of us in the meeting said it doesn't make sense for us to do this, and we should let it go, especially given the fact that we do have this power of zoning. I also looked at all of the staff members in the room that have spent a lot of time looking at this, and I said, are we making the right decision? You are the experts in this field. You know, I'm a banker, we've got attorneys, we've got finance people, you know, but the people in the room all agreed that this was a very risky endeavor to take on because of these costs and the unknown factors. Then suddenly last week, I find out that, nope, the majority party has decided they do want to buy it. But I also haven't heard what they want to do with it yet, which has considerable financial impact as well. If they're looking to just create a park and make it open land, then we should know what those expenses are going to be, and also be looking at what is the opportunity cost of the lost tax revenue if a developer were to buy it. If the idea is that they want to develop it, then I would think we would want to be doing the community outreach even before we make this decision to buy it, because this body tries to be very attuned to what our residents want and will accept in their neighborhood. It was actually a year ago at this meeting that the proposal for the increased floor area ratio in the business district of the center was proposed. And it's a year later, and we haven't come to a accommodation for the neighborhood yet to make any change in that FAR. That's an entire year. So again, here's this decision, let's go buy this property, but I don't know what it is we're looking to do with it. And it's, for me, very difficult to make any type of financial decision when I don't even know where we're going with it. I don't think there's any harm in waiting until after the state adopts its budget and we have a better handle on our own budget before pursuing this. With the outstanding toxic cleanup required, I don't think we run the risk of a developer immediately, rushing to the fore and trying to buy it out from under us and do some development. They know they have to work through the town, through our zoning. I still believe we have that right of second refusal, and I know that's there's a difference between how we are interpreting that and how the state is interpreting it, but even the fact that it's open to interpretation means that it's something that we could utilize to hold up any developer that we thought was going to be detrimental to the town. We could hold that up in court for years. The mere fact that we would have the ability to do that also makes it unattractive for some developer. They don't want to tie up their funds for that amount of time. The state has their own budget problems. I don't think it's our responsibility to rush forward so that we can settle this problem for them. There's a couple of other issues that also, make me look at this and say, I don't think now is the time. There's no harm in waiting. First of all, we're looking at how do we get our unions to work with us over pay freezes or other things to help us with this year's budget. To me, saying we need everybody to, pitch in and help us save, but oh, by the way, we're going to spend $1 million and buy this property and take on all of these costs, it doesn't send the right message. I also wonder about our own internal resources. This is a huge project. Between all of the development that's been going on in town, the apartment buildings, the hotel, the FAR project, our community development team is, working like mad. I don't know that we have the capacity to take on a project like that, nor do I think it really is the role of government to get into development. When we did the Blueback Square, that was a little bit different in that there were town buildings involved, town property involved. This is an overt step to say, I want to go out and buy land and develop it. That's an activity that I think belongs in the private sector, and I think we use our power of zoning to control it. There's already been a number of discussions with developers that show interest in working with the town to create that maybe public-private. I think we can do that without having to be the owner of the land. I think we can have the developer be the owner and know that they can have a partner with the town of West Hartford. Finally, we have a new manager coming to town. So I have complete faith in Matt Hart. I think he's going to do a wonderful job. but he is going to be, as soon as he comes on board, having to learn everything about what goes on in West Hartford. And we have a lot going on. And we are a much larger town than Mansfield. And so to put this project on top of everything else that he would need to dive into immediately, I think is unfair to the rest of the town services that we're providing, and frankly, maybe a little unfair to Matt. I don't see any harm in waiting. I think we're still going to have the opportunity, and I also think that we may have a unique opportunity with when Matt Hart joins us as town manager. In his role as town manager of Mansfield, he's been working closely with the University of Connecticut and different state officials. Maybe there's some partnership that he might be proposing to work closely with UConn and West Hartford. And that could be something that comes down the line once we have more information about what's happening at this site. I think working together between UConn and West Hartford, we may even be able to then get a greater understanding of whether there are grants to deal with some of the contamination and how that's going to work out. But I would need to be ensured that we're properly indemnified from any responsibility for the contamination on the site before I would say, I want to buy this property today. So, for those reasons, I will not support this resolution tonight. But I would be happy to entertain it in the future when we have a clearer understanding of our own financial house and the actual shape of the property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hall. Anybody else wish to speak on the resolution?
I do.
Mr. Barnes.
Do you guys intend to speak as well? Or are we going to go back and forth, or?
No one asked to speak. You
Fine.
You did.
Thank
The floor is yours, Mr. Barnes.
Appreciate it, thank you. I'd like to thank Mrs. Hall for her comments tonight, very thoughtful comments, actually, and it's just an example of why she's an outstanding town councilor. I don't think that, whether you agree on the issue or not, in my 4 years, I think that's the best I've heard, so thank you,
Thank you, Chris.
for that. The history of this property goes back a number of years when UConn announced that they were going to be moving down to Hartford. And we've talked about kind of what would end up happening with this parcel. We were approached by a for-profit international education outfit that had interest in purchasing the parcel for, I believe it was $12.8 million, and at the time it was quick moving, and it, in my opinion, not well thought out and vetted, and didn't have an opportunity for the public to weigh in on it. And last year, Mr. Williams and I spent quite a bit of time opposed to that project, hoping that in the end we would be able, as a town, to control the parcel and the direction that it would go in. And in fact, that happened. They stepped aside, and we ended up being the buyer of choice, so to speak, and the sales prices continued to go down, and I did vote to purchase the parcel at $5 million because I believe that controlling it was important and that we could create something that enriched our community, that it would be a great thing, whether it was a park or athletic facilities or a dog park or some type of mixed use. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. Mark McGovern and his staff and others have worked up renderings and all these great ideas, and they were really some great ideas. And then unfortunately, we came into this year with a budget that was a substantial hardship before the state even stepped in and proposed cuts to our grant money and attempting to shift obligations to us. We were already looking at a big budget. And then finally, 6 weeks ago, when we first reviewed the town manager's proposed budget, it included a number of things, ironically enough. One was an idea to lower our budget numbers. One was to sell town-owned parcels of land to receive about an estimated $600,000 of revenue. Along that list was to close a senior center for $120,000, close a pool for $28,000, close a branch of one of our libraries for $220,000, eliminate dial-a-ride for about $200,000, eliminate parking validation at Noah Webster for $130,000. And these are items I expect we'll talk about more in a little bit, but these were some of the items that we were considering. In addition, under our CNRE budget, we had made reductions to spending money on outdoor pool improvements to the tune of $80,000, to reduce $120,000 of park and playscape improvements as well. And so as we look at our budget and we look at the things we're proposing to cut, and then we look at what we're proposing to purchase and the unknowns that Mrs. Hall went through in detail with respect to the condition of the buildings, the remediation and the liabilities that flow from it, and where we are financially. The timing is not right to acquire the parcel. And we did have a conversation a number of weeks back where we agreed that this, wasn't the right time at that number. And then somehow that changed, and there were some folks on our council that decided it was something that they wanted to do and a piece of property that we had to have. And for a while we were in a stalemate, and finally there were enough votes to purchase the parcel. But again, like Mrs. Hall says, I don't understand the rush to get it done. I understand what the contract terms are. I think it's something that if we take a wait-and-see approach on the state budget to see what happens and to see where we are financially, that's a prudent decision. And it's also prudent to wait because of the environmental issues concerning the property, to wait to see that those items have been addressed to DEEP's satisfaction, and that those issues are addressed before we become the owner of the property. And so for those reasons, I will not be supporting the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Anyone else wish to comment on the resolution this evening?
Sure.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'll be brief because both my colleagues did a great job. We spent a lot of our year talking about affordability at this table. This isn't affordable. And it's not affordable because it has nothing to do with the purchase price. It's because of the unknowns. What we do know is that the property is toxic. We know that. We don't know the extent of the toxicity or how much it's going to cost us. But yet it feels as though we're going to purchase this property. That doesn't seem like a decision that's keeping with a sentiment to ensure that this town remains affordable to our taxpayers. We're going to vote on a $285 million budget tonight. $285 million. We're going to buy a parcel that we don't know how much it's going to cost for us to take care of it. Put aside the purchase price. The purchase price doesn't even matter. It's the unknown with respect to liability. I know there are my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are concerned about this purchase and have reflected deeply about this purchase. And I would just ask you to consider the unknown liabilities. We know that there are liabilities, but the unknown cost. And think about whether that's a risk worth taking at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Anyone else wish to comment on the resolution? Mrs. Casperson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I think that this has been a challenge for all of us. in many respects. Mrs. Hall, you made great comments. It's not that those things aren't true. I think that we sit at this table to try to determine where do we go next and what is the best course for us. We've entered into a contract where there's already money out there, which hasn't been mentioned, of course. What we stand to lose if we don't act, and really taking the time to think about what kind of revenue might we be able to get from this parcel, what things we might be able to recommend, listening to the public to see what the opportunity could be. I think that there are other things in the contracts that we've discussed that would have UConn pick up part of the remediation for that, and the cost that it would have to us, there is a cap on that, in my understanding. So there are risks with everything, but understanding the risk and knowing what the outcome might be is also things that we try to consider here. So I don't think that it's a cut and dry, that we as a majority just choose to move forward. I think that as in everything, we have to sit back and balance all of the facts and try to consider what would the town want. And with that, that's part of my consideration for the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Casperson. Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I plan on voting in support of the resolution. I'm at a loss to understand the argument that we can simply control this property through zoning when there was near panic from some people when a school looked to purchase the property, which would have required no change in zoning. I think it is critical that the town control the use of this property, and we cannot be short-sighted about this decision. This is about the future of West Hartford. It's about the future of our community, and this is one of the most important community assets that we have. This is a unique opportunity, and we will never again have the chance to control this much open land and open space in West Hartford again. I'm optimistic. I think that at this purchase price, it is very possible, I think it is likely. In fact, I'm almost certain that we will find a good use for this property for the town, in all likelihood that is both public and private. And I look forward to working with everybody to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Mr. Winograd.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I'm excited about this project, and I've been excited about it, for a while, as soon as we heard that UConn was selling. 2 points I want to make, and one is, we've all read, and we're not going to debate today the science of it, but we've seen the reports on the environmental issues with the property that exist that we found through due diligence as part of our negotiation for a purchase price. When I bought my house, I discovered the roof needed doing, and we helped negotiate a better price. I think that was appropriate. Kudos to our staff for finding it. Some of the tests apparently weren't even ones that would always be done. But I don't think I've seen evidence of it being sort of toxic in a way that some of the comments seem to portray. These are remediable. Some of it will be required for them to sell. Others we can handle. I think we do know what those costs will be. Some of the chemicals sound pretty scary, but actually they're the PCBs that go straight down. It doesn't spread. It goes into the ground. It can be dug. We should dig deeper than the state was doing for whatever our purposes are for the property. But listen, I think to some extent, if it were as bad as described, then frankly development won't happen, and we're faced with the fence going up around that property for a long time. If the state can't sell it, then they're just going to fence it off and board up the property, and we're going to have a horrible eyesore in the middle of one of our great neighborhoods. So I don't think that is likely. I don't think the science bears that out. And I think that ultimately this is a site that will be both developable, whether in whole or in part, and used for our own benefit. And as Councilman Dodge says, this is a unique opportunity. They don't grow property anymore. And we're never going to get an opportunity like this to have this sort of size of property. The other thing is just in terms of who should develop it and whether it's the role of government to do so. I'm quite confident that we will do a better job of making this a property that the town can be proud of for the future than anyone else will do. I certainly don't trust the state to properly find and work with a seller to do it in the benefit of all our residents. I think we will do a better job of as you talked about, Ms. Hall, talking to our residents like we do, and finding out exactly how people want to use it, and getting that input, and making it one that our residents can be proud of. I'm sure we will do that better than anyone, and we'll have a better opportunity to do that as the owner rather than as a zoning official. I also think that our staff, I trust in them, both our current staff as well as incoming manager, to work with potential developers and our own staff to develop a great plan, which will, I hope, be some combination. Some tax rolls would be great to get from that. Obviously, we need that for the affordability of our town, but also a great opportunity to have space for, again, many of the things that we've talked about, whether it's a dog park, whether it's an opportunity for the museum to go there. I mean, there are lots of plans, whether it's these great plans we saw of various ideas. I think we do have the ability to do that. And the argument that's very legitimate of our fear of the state budget right now, it's there. It's obviously, it's a real concern, but it's also one that I don't think can prevent us from doing really a generational decision. Yes, right now it would be nice to not have to make this decision right now with this budget unresolved, but this is, in fact, the time to do it. And I don't think simply waiting for things to get better is going to be advantageous to us. And again, this is something that does not come along every day, and we just seize this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd.
Thank you. I have been torn about this piece of property. And for all the reasons that Denise so eloquently spoke about. And I really struggled about making a mistake with this property. So I asked our town manager to sort of do a pros, cons, and a suggestion, knowing that I'm not a developer. I can only say my thoughts. And quite frankly, I relied heavily on our town manager's suggestion. And it was that given our finances, given the potential for this property, given the fact that we will have control of this property and there will be opportunities through development, that it was a smart decision to make. So if it's not, then I can always blame Ron. So I will be supporting this resolution.
Thank you, Mrs. Kerrigan. Okay, does anyone else wish to speak before I do? Okay. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just to touch base on some things that were said, there were some comments that we know what the cost is to clean it up. We have no idea what the cost is. If we did, that would have been discussed already. That's the whole point. We have no idea what the remediation cost is. So that's not an accurate statement. And in reference to the science bearing out what the costs are, there's just, the whole issue here is we don't know what we're dealing with, and yet we're willing to purchase and take on future liability. Ms. Kerrigan, I know you say you trust in staff, but our staff has been pretty consistent over the last month that they did not think it was a good purchase. And And when discussing this Yukon property, once it was identified that there were some contaminants. You don't like the word toxic, contaminants, fine. We started hearing this discussion, well, Yukon's going to put up a fence and let the grass grow and it's going to be unattractive. Do you know what I call that? I call that avoiding the substance of the argument. Too much of our discussions here focus on fear and not the merits. And that to me is a little bit of a fear tactic. And quite frankly, I find it offensive. The idea that we have a choice between purchasing a property that has contaminants or having an eyesore in the middle of town, to me, is not a basis for a substantive discussion that we should be having at this table. And so, again, there are a lot of unknowns. We don't have a lot of answers. I'm glad that there's optimism and excitement, but if we want to have a good result for our town, we should know what it is we're purchasing. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Mr. Barnes?
Thank you. You know, I too would like to think that, you know, that there's a revenue opportunity. But I also know that in our meetings, as we went around the table discussing the pros and cons of this purchase, we not only were we all over the map and pretending to be real estate developers, you know, like President Trump, but we were clearly, you know, throwing darts. It's not our area of expertise. And while I have trust and faith in town staff as well, there's something to be said for taxing the resources of the town at a time when outside developers could be doing it and taking the risk and working with town staff and bringing something that would enhance our community into being, to fruition. With respect to doing what the town wants, it's an interesting point. I can say I haven't had anyone at this time come up to me and say, we have to buy the property, and I'm really concerned about a fence going up and the grass growing. The concern has been more around, what are we going to do with this budget? And this budget, I submit to you, the future of West Hartford is not the 58-acre parcel. It is the budget tonight, the budget next year, and the budgets in the coming years that are going to decide what our town's going to look like in the long term. Because in the short term, we're dealing with, you know, kind of the Band-Aids and bubblegum approach to, you know, keeping it together, when every day the news we hear from the state is worse and worse, and I'm sure we'll get into that later. That's the future of our town. It's about managing our finances, putting together conservative budgets, and putting together sustainable budgets for the long term for the taxpayers of our town. And so to me, that is the future of our town. And with respect to Mr. Winograd's comment that the property is not toxic enough to vote against or to wait for the purchase, I'm not sure I understand that. The Deep report made it clear, the Hartford Current reporting on it made it clear. There's certainly issues that are going to need to be addressed by, you know, environmentalists and attorneys and remediation experts to make sure that whatever work is done properly. And as you know, what we discussed was, even if Yukon remediated the soil to a commercial standard, which we've been told by our town attorneys is their obligation, that's not the residential standard, which requires a lower parts per million for the contaminants in the soil, and will simply require us to do all of the work again, remove all of the new soil, go down deeper to get the additional contaminated soil, and basically do over what Yukon has already done. So the costs, the concerns, the potential liabilities, we clearly, you know, disagree about it. If we go forward and purchase the property, I hope it works out in our best interest. I simply have concerns about that.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Anyone else wish to speak? Mrs. Hall.
I think there were just a couple of points in regard to the $250,000 that we have spent. Yes, we have spent $250,000. Sometimes that's an investment into having more perfect knowledge and potentially a future cost avoidance. So while you could say, you know, I hate the fact that we spent it, if it helped us to make a decision that meant we didn't take on unnecessary costs, then that's good. In regard to Mr. Dodge's comment about about control and the fact that we weren't going to have control over Wei Ming, I think that the issue there wasn't so much that a potential school was going to go in. I don't think that that was the problem at all. I think what happened was there wasn't an understanding that the school was also going to be an international school that would involve paying students in our public schools too. So that's and it was a large number of students, and a very different model for the town's public school system than what we had. And so that is when so many people came out to talk about it. It wasn't the lack of zoning control that got us, people upset. It was more of, that's a big change in use. There's a school there now. It's not a school that impacts our public schools. So I think that was the difference there. Again, I'm not saying that this might not be a good opportunity in the future, but I just see no harm in waiting until we have that knowledge about the true state of what's there. I don't think we run the risk that someone comes in and buys it out from under us. I actually think that, we may end up at an even better price than $1 million if we step back right now and they don't get another buyer. Frankly, I think they should pay us to take this on, but that's another point. The other thing is the scare tactic with the fence. They just put all this money into a glossy website and marketing. I don't think they're going to say, oh, let me make this property look as ugly as we can so we can go out and get the best price. I'm not worried about that. And if they got to the point that we are there in the future, we've got the knowledge, we can still make an offer to buy it in the future. I just don't think we have to do it today until some of these unknowns are removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hall. Anyone else? Mrs. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Ron, would you mind speaking to some of the concerns that have been mentioned here, such as the contamination, the timing, the price?
Contamination. We spent about $180,000 separate from the deposit money. The $250,000 was a deposit on it, which we lose if we don't take action. We spent about $180,000 doing an in-depth investigation. We found PCBs on the site, not uncommon in a building this age. We would find it in investigation of most buildings of this age. We informed the university of that. They did the right thing, informed DEEP, and began a process with DEEP. Because we found PCBs, we were concerned that it might be larger than our initial sampling, and so we did extensive sampling of the soils to determine the extent to which there were PCBs in the soils. PCBs come in a building of this era and the caulking that goes around the windows. It's an oil that leaks into the masonry. It's an oil that leaks through the masonry eventually over decades into the soil around the building. It is, again, not uncommon. I think we have a pretty good number on what it is. We didn't do a light investigation. We did an in-depth investigation. we put a number of $420,000 on the cost of remediating the PCBs at this site. Additional work to remediate the buildings during demolition were included in the demolition. There's asbestos in these buildings. There's PCBs, again, something you would find in any building. So I think we had a pretty good number on the PCBs. And again, PCBs aren't an awful pollution. They're something you find in buildings of this era, and it's something that we clean up when we find it fairly easily. It's the common underground storage tank, the oil spreads much faster and farther than a PCB oil would do. So I think we have a pretty good answer on that. I had a developer call me today who has built hundreds, maybe thousands of residential structures. He's a resident of West Hartford now in his 70s, and he called me to talk to me about the Yukon property. And when I explained to him what the negotiation was discussing for a purchase price, he said, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said." And when I repeated it, he said, "Did you say $1 million?" And he said, "Well, that's fabulous." Now, he didn't know the data that I have. He didn't know those things. But as a developer, he looked at the site and thought, "Oh, well, I can see where we've built on that site. This has opportunity." Councilman Barnes asked me in an email if he wanted the town manager's opinion. I think at $1 million, if we were to buy the land under the park that we have on this site, under the ball fields that we have on this site, $1 million is probably a reasonable price for that land right there. The chance that we have the opportunity to buy a larger site. Quite clearly, there will be additional expenses. But I believe if you allow development on this site, you could generate $500,000 in new taxes from this every year. I think there is development opportunity. I've done this a long time in my career. Pat Allaire and I are really responsible for Blueback Square. We spent many hours negotiating that, writing the agreements, working with outside attorneys and whatnot. The present staff of the town of West Hartford is capable of doing that. It's the same job they'll do if Yukon finds a developer. They're going to spend hours working with that developer, make sure that project that comes to the town is something that we would accept and could approve. So whether it's Yukon selling it or the town trying to develop it, I think we have plenty of staff and ability to do that. So I think there's opportunity. I do not disagree that the budget is a problem for us, and the governor's proposed budget scared us a lot. Took $14.5 million out of West Hartford, and that made us all pause, and that's why we did pause. And at that time, we were talking $5 million. We were talking 20% of a price we thought was okay. I think that number actually does work. It'll take some time to do it, and I would reiterate what you said, which was we'll do a better job of finding the right developer, the right project for this site, than just offering it out to the world and saying, somebody come and take a run at it. I think developers will be scared of doing it if it's just Yukon. They'd be scared of the right of second refusal if we have it. A developer to come to you with a project is easily a $150,000 expenditure on their part to give you a proposal for the reuse of this site. If they don't believe there is a high potential of success, they won't make that. If they worry about that right of second refusal, they're not going to make those investments. First thing they always ask our staff is, what can I do? We can't answer that question, but at least we can help them work toward a solution that may be successful in the community. So I think staff's there. I think we have fairly good understanding of numbers. And I think at this price, it has potential, if you develop it, a portion of it. The vast majority of this is going to be open space. There's substantial wetlands, floodplains on this. There's going to be large grassy areas, there's going to be large open space, and an opportunity for the community at some point in the future to perhaps expand its park uses on the east side of Trop Brook. All of that doesn't have to occur in the next 2 years or even 5 years, as long as you maintain the property. But I would expect that if we were to agree that we would allow some development on this site in the next 2 years, we would have that developer before you easily and ready to build.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Thank you. I'll wrap it up here. When we started with the resolution, I thought it was going to not take as long as it did, because basically we're just saying that the authority the manager had went from $5 million to $1 million this evening. And that's where we were going. But tonight I think everyone got a very respectful and complete understanding as to the different positions various members of this body hold, and I respect each and every one of those for the ability to express them as well as they did with the reasonings behind them. I would reach a different conclusion than the minority party here this evening, and I believe that having the manager go forward with the $1 million authority to purchase this site is the right decision for our town and for our future. As the manager just mentioned, I wholeheartedly believe that the value of the parcel to the east contains the Miracle League and the fields is definitely worth at least $1 million to our community. And with respect to the western side, that has many questions still to be resolved and taken care of, but I'm certain that the town will take due diligent steps and hire the appropriate people to assist us with the transaction to ensure that whatever we do meets all types of environmental regulations and is safe. And I do believe that we do have the power of zoning, but what is more powerful than the power of zoning is the power of ownership. And I think our residents will be well served by the town of West Hartford owning this parcel. And with that said, I'd like to call the question. So all those in favor of the resolution, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Nay. Motion carries 5-3. Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Goodbye, and have safe travels. Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, Barb.
Six. I can barely stand up. So the 7 million.
like the night Return of the Jedi came out. You know, I wouldn't miss this for the world. I don't blame you.
A bit shorter if I have.
No, yeah, I got the, you know, if it exists.
All these, yes.
Sorry, Rob. Hi, my name's Adam Keating. We never met.
Okay.
But look, I'm playing like.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it goes into a fund.
Which I'll do the way out.
Or whatever, yeah, well, the gates are up here. Or the garage. All that.
Right.
And out of that fund, we.
And the receivables there, 14,000.
What are you reading my CAFR? Is that what this is?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the CAFR is a different document than the budget that they're doing tonight.
So this doesn't have $2 million sitting in the fund.
Say, Peter? Peter? Yeah. No, a receivable is just someone owes us money.
Yeah.
Okay. The CAFR is the annual comprehensive financial report.
It's a dog.
He's trying to understand.
Why there's $2 million in our parking.
Let's put it this way.
What?
Until
Does that need
I
a
woke
balance
up at
year after year?
4 o'clock this afternoon, having gone to bed at 6 o'clock the night before.
Okay.
We bought the garage, the bond, the garage was
Yeah.
Just about everything I could find in the medicine cabinet.
Okay, so then is that this,
I don't know what it is. My wife got something towards the end of last week, and then we had a house full of family, including 2 infants over the weekend, both of whom had runny noses, so,
Yeah, yeah.
parking lot,
you know.
well, these are the
So I'm just hoping that
And did
I can go back to bed tonight and not get up again for many, many hours, and hopefully we'll feel better. Yeah, I do too. But don't expect any keen insights from me tonight.
I'm just looking out there for them, they're gonna stay awake and I'm gonna take out the doors.
No, if you see me close my eyes, it's because they're burning, and I'm just not doing this, but.
Okay. Right.
The intent of the fund is that all costs associated with parking.
Yeah, right.
I'm on the verge of closing my eyes. And if I do that, then I might think about
I think I could go down, it should go down to 0 every year then, right? Because, you know, I pay my.
No, we carry, it would go down to 0 every year if I paid.
So at least there's that.
Right.
But we accumulate money and they already pay those every.
So is that accounted for then? Do we have like a long-term that this is building up towards?
I got just a brutal all of a sudden came on me. I went to bed at 6 o'clock last night and got up at 4 this afternoon. Yeah. This is the longest I've ever
If something goes wrong.
That would make sense, because I couldn't find a house in this building or something, but I couldn't
Well,
find an explanation for
I
it.
do need to remind you all of the that they have to be done by now.
They're different than the general fund. Each of those have a special
We have
purpose
a
associated with
65-day
it, where
time
they do
limit,
accumulate money.
and depending on how you do the math, we go to 65 days
On a website
plus one,
you can just
or
match those up.
on no later than the 65th day. 65th day. I'm sorry. But we've always taken the cautious approach. It's got to be 65 full days. So.
Everyone to push it like
Well, just to make sure. I would be persuaded to give that opinion.
I'm on the website.
Sherry, tonight. Well, he may have said that, but it's 65 full days and tomorrow's the 65th day.
Okay, we're going to continue. We are going to move items, we're going to actually move them together, discuss them together, and vote on them separately. So, Mr. Davidoff, would you like to read items 6? Actually, it's only going to be 6, 7, 8, and 9. 10 is separate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All of these are a motion to adopt. Number 6, an ordinance deauthorizing $3,315,000 for projects authorized in the capital improvement program for the fiscal year 2017-2018, appropriating $1,793,000 for projects in the capital improvement program for the fiscal year 2017-2018, appropriating $16,602,000 for projects in the capital improvement program for the fiscal year 2018-2019, and authorizing issuance of bonds of the town in the amount not to exceed $15,080,000 to finance the appropriations and pending the issuance thereof, the making of temporary borrowings for such purpose. Number 7 would be a motion to adopt an ordinance concerning appropriations for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2017. Number 8 would be a motion to adopt an ordinance concerning appropriations to and in the capital improvement fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2017. And number 9 would be a motion to adopt a resolution concerning the tax levy on the list of October 1st, 2016.
Okay, before we get into a vote on this, and it would be a roll call by item, again, this is our budget items that we're going to be voting on, separated by different ordinance and items. We're going to have a presentation from town staff, and I just wanted to we're all going to make comments, but I just want to preface this by saying that there has not been, I've been a member of the council 12 years, there's not been a budget as complicated and it has as many moving parts as this one does. So we did have a very difficult time in 2008, no question, but we knew the pieces, and we knew there was some control. We knew the direction. This one, there's a lot of moving parts, and many of them have long-term consequences. So with that, I think Mr. Privatera is going to be doing a presentation and talking about what we have really done since the manager's budget, I think.
Thank you. Do you all have the latest budget package that was handed out with... Make sure you talk close to the mic. Okay. Better? Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah, and all the amendments that were made on page 2. Okay. It has been a very difficult and different budget process this year, primarily due to the great unknown of what the state of Connecticut is eventually going to do. When we prepared this budget and now that we're making recommendations to amend it, we're trying to be very conservative here and position ourselves in such a place that if something dramatic happens at the state level, we will be prepared to deal with it accordingly. The budget that you have before you, I like to look at it in 3 separate parts. Capital financing. Capital financing basically represents the debt service, the principal and interest that we're required to pay on outstanding bonds, and also a cost associated with issuing debt every year. It's a pretty straightforward calculation. One of the primary reasons why it's going up a little more than $1.2 million is we issued bonds in January, and our first principal and interest payments are due next fiscal year. The second is the Board of Education budget. The superintendent had submitted a budget to the Board of Education. They amended that budget, and that budget is reflected with one adjustment to that. This proposal recommends the reduction of additional $300,000. Now, of that $300,000, I've been in contact with the finance director at the board, and we had discussed negotiating some busing contracts, and he was successful in renegotiating one of the busing contracts to save about $75,000 next year and $700,000 over the life of the renewal period. So that's going to mitigate that cut slightly. So with respect to the town budget, the budget reflects current services. There's no layoffs. There's no program eliminations. There's no reductions to public safety. Actually, we added a new position of an assistant fire chief for the paramedic service to bolster that program. We're not closing any firehouses. We're not closing any library branches. We're not closing any senior centers. We're not imposing parking fees for the main library branch, nor are we proposing parking fees on Sunday. And we're not changing the way trash is picked up or introducing new programs in that area. So basically, we're maintaining the current level of services that the residents have come to depend on. Now, I want to talk about three major areas of impact in this budget. The first is ECS, or education cost sharing. This budget is a little different in its approach. We assumed that we will receive at least $1.5 million in ECS funding that will be used to mitigate increases on the expense side, used to reduce taxes. It's part of our tax calculation. If we don't receive that $1.5 million in extra ECS funds, we'll have a hole in our budget. We're also assuming that we're going to receive an additional $7.1 million in ECS. Now, that money in total will bring us up to our current ECS level, but that additional $7.1 million we are not using to offset taxes. We're taking that money in as a revenue, and we're setting up a contingency expense account. So whatever money comes in as part of that $7 million will go into this contingency account. Now, the rationale behind that is there's so much uncertainty out there that if we do receive any funds over 1.5 million, and if we assume any funds over 1.5 million and we don't get them, we'd have a significant budgetary problem. So let's say this budget called for $5 million in additional state aid. What would happen if we only received $1.5 million? We'd have a big problem. We'd have a shortfall of $3.5 million. And something like that is hard to recover from. So assuming we do get more money than the $1.5 million that's in the tax plan, there may be a couple of options on what to do with that money. There may be a bill coming up in the state legislature that allows cities and towns to amend their budgets after the state adopts its budget and after we adopt the budget. So the council will have an opportunity and the mayor to weigh in on that. And, you know, if we receive a significant amount of money, they may decide to use that money to reduce the second tax bills in next fiscal year. Or they may decide to keep that money in a contingency account, roll it over into next fiscal year, and use it to mitigate tax increases or fixed costs in next fiscal year or the next 2 or 3 fiscal years. The second area of significant impact could be teachers' pension payments. When the superintendent submitted his budget to the Board of Education, his budget basically mirrored the governor's budget with respect to teachers' pension payment, ECS, change in formula, and excess cost. When the Board of Education adopted the budget, they basically reversed all of that and said, we're gonna adopt this budget, under the assumption that things are not going to change. So that $8.1 million of teachers' pension payment is not in the Board of Education budget, nor is it in the town budget. Now, I know that the town manager and the mayor have been talking to our legislative leaders and making the rounds, talking to mayors and chief elected officials throughout the state, and the vast majority have come back with, we don't think we're going to put that in our budget, or we're not putting that budget because we don't think there's a collective will to vote for that. And I think the significant percentage of cities and towns are not including it. So the rationale behind not including this is it would be quite hard for an official to vote for an expense for a town when they don't have it in their budget. That could be a fiscal catastrophe. So we're pretty comfortable that this might not happen. The third adjustment is the MDC. We had included $1.77 million in the town manager's budget as a potential reserve payment should the city of Hartford default on two of their payments. This was not part of our tax calculation. We were funding this through prior year surplus, the surplus we're going to generate this year. Recently, a bill was approved by the House and it's pending a vote in the Senate. It's an MDC bill. The important part that affects this is the legislation says that if an MDC member town fails to make a payment, the OPM director, excuse me, the OPM secretary is directed to make that payment to the MDC on the town's behalf and then reduce that payment from the state grants that are due to that town plus a penalty. So the $1.77 million that we had set aside for that now seems to be a moot point because all indications are that the Senate will approve that bill and will relieve us of this liability. So we have this $1.77 million at the end of the fiscal year. It puts us in a great position for a couple of scenarios. One, what if we don't get the $1.5 million of additional ECS funds? What if something happens and we're held flat? Well, we can use that $1.77 million to mitigate that. Or what if some form of a teacher's pension payment comes out and, let's say they want to spread it out over a 3 to 5 year period and we find ourselves with a $1.5 to $2 million liability to make a payment. Well, we can use that $1.77 million to mitigate that as well. It's a conservative approach. We've looked at it from all angles. The only significant concern that we could have is if everyone is wrong and we receive an $8 million teacher's pension payment, then at this point that would be catastrophic. It would be a combination of emptying out our reserves, which would ultimately result in a credit downgrade, or slashing programs and services that are currently out there. But I think the count was about 130 towns out of 169 don't believe it's going to happen. So it would be hard pressed for that type of action to happen, I believe. So all in all, we're looking at a budget increase of $17.1 million, of which $7.1 million is that extra contingency. You'll see on your sheet, it indicates an increase of 6.37%, but in all reality, it's about 3.7% when you net out that additional $7.1 million of ECS. It results in a real and personal property mill rate increasing from 39.51 mils to 41.04 mils, 1.53 mil increase, or 3.87%. The motor vehicle mill rate under current legislation will drop from 37 mils to 32 mils, a reduction of 5 mils. And what we try to do is we try to compare what would happen with a median home, an average or medium home assessed at a value of $224,000 with two average vehicles. Based on that and the tax package that we have here, if you're in that home, your taxes would go up about 2.66%, or about $253 annually. Now, that's not to say that it's going to be that way for everyone, because some properties are increasing and some properties are decreasing, and commercial properties some of them are really climbing. But we look at averages, and that's for an average home. I don't want to go over every adjustment that we made because you have it before you, but I'm willing to answer any question you might have on the calculations and the mill rate and any of the adjustments that are proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Could you just let us know if there were no changes to the funding in state funding from last year to this year, what would that budget have looked like, and what would that average home scenario have been? Right. We did a quick calculation, and actually, if we were funded at the same level and we didn't lose any state funding, that average homeowner would see a decrease in their taxes of about a quarter of well, let me see, I have the actual number right here. That homeowner would see
an actual savings of about $63. And that's due primarily because of the reduction in the mill rate, but also in the current fiscal year, the motor vehicle mill rate is 37 mils. The new legislation drops it down to 32 mils. So a slight increase in your real estate property tax, but a significant increase in your motor vehicle tax. So it's about a $63 savings or a reduction of about 0.66% of 1%.
Thank you. Any questions on the numbers for Peter in the adjustments? Mrs. Hall.
So if we were in that position, we would probably also be saying we need to make an increase in our contribution to the pension. So I think, and we know that as we're going into this next valuation period, that we're going to have to lower the discount rate, and that means we will have to increase our annual required contribution. So I just, if we were in that good place,
Yeah.
then we would also have another area of focus that we would want to address with that budget.
Correct. And we are heading in that direction. Obviously, I think there was a commitment by the pension board and all of us collectively that we are going to reduce the discount rate gradually over the next few years. And obviously, if we do have a $1.8 million surplus at the end of the fiscal year, there's certainly going to be some discussion on how to use it. But I would caution you before we make any type of decision like that, we'd have to see what next year's budget brings to bear as well, because, the year after, which would be the 19 budget. But certainly, we can discuss that and talk about using some of that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. If I was going to guess you'd ask one question, that would have been the question I would have thought you would have asked. Just saying.
It was either that or OPEB, I think.
Yes. All right. Anything else for Mr. Privatera? Okay. All right. I guess that's the presentation. What about comments on the budget? Would somebody like to start?
You normally
I don't. I'm not. I was in that seat, and I'm not. That's a different role for me.
I know,
So-
but you're still head of finance.
No, I'm not starting. It's my prerogative. Would you like to start?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
This is a new position. For years, you've led off the discussion on the finance
I'm a little
committee.
insulted because I have read 5 pages before, and you gave Mrs. Hall well-deserved, a wonderful, kudos to that. But I think I've done a good job in the past of doing that. Maybe not in the last 4 years. Anyway, go ahead, Mrs. Hall.
So since I'm starting, I get to be the first one to thank Ron and Peter and Liz and Barbara for all of the hard work with this budget. It's been a nightmare, and I know how many hours you guys put in. It's amazing how it doesn't matter what question we ask, you know exactly what the answer is and what page it's on, and you guys just do an amazing job, so thank you very much. We appreciate it. I'm really just sorry that you had to deal with the state's fiscal mess. You shouldn't have to be put in this position. I also would very much like to say thank you to Mayor Cantor. It has been a pleasure working with you. I very much enjoy the fact that we can talk about things, that we have a great relationship, there's respect, and I know how hard you have been working since you took over in this role, and you're doing, the Lord's work here, because this has, from the moment you stepped in, it's been one disaster after another thrust on you, and I realize that. And, this is a volunteer job, and I don't know, there's not too many people that would have had the dedication to put the hours in that you're doing, so I do appreciate that. But something has got to change in Connecticut. The governor's proposed budget was just plain irresponsible, And we're in a position now where we still have no idea what we're going to get in the way of state grants. It is impossible to set a budget when we have so many unknown factors involved. So we're either going to overtax residents, which would be unfair, and it's nice to think that we're going to put that aside for future years, but the person who's leaving town 3 months from now, 6 months from now, how fair is that to them that they're paying taxes that we shouldn't have raised? So, on the other hand, if we undertax people, and then have negative results from the state, then that means we're going to, dip into reserve funds, which could then impact our bond ratings. So I would say that, and this is my 8th budget, and this has been the most insane one I've ever been through. So we're assuming that the state is going to make these grant payments to us, but every day we hear more negative news about the state's finances. So things are not going to get better this year, and they're not going to get better next year. So I think we need to reconcile ourselves to the fact that our state funding is not going to grow. And with that, it's really difficult to say we're just going to go with a roll-forward budget. We're not going to cut this. It's great that we're going to keep all of our services, but it does mean just that roll forward. Every year the budget goes up and up. I looked at last year's ordinance concerning appropriations versus this year's, and the simple roll forward in the fire department is an extra $600,000. Facility services is an extra $400,000. Debt service, an extra $1.3 million. All of these things continue to grow year in and year out. We are going to increase the amount of property taxes that we collect by 7.2% if this budget goes through. It just keeps growing. So at this point, I know this is where Leon is saying, well, what cuts did you propose? Because we've had that discussion before. And I will just reiterate that, my caucus it's just the 3 of us, so we don't have the votes to get any particular cuts passed unless it's something that the majority party wants to do. We're always happy to work with any of you to put through any cuts that you want to put through. But I think it's a waste of our time, because I have wasted that time before in the past making those recommendations that just don't go through. So I'm not going to go through them again. But instead, I will focus my comments on what I think is the bigger issue, the frustrating fact that we have little or no control over the biggest portion of our expenses, which is salaries and benefits, as they are subject to state laws on collective bargaining. So it's a known fact with most people these days that as long as you've got a job in the public sector, then you're going to be set for life. But it is the rest of us in the private sector that are paying for that sense of well-being, and many of us can't afford other tax increases by the state or the municipality. We need to curtail the overly rich compensation for public employees, as it is choking off our ability to pay for current services. Indeed, many of the emails I have received from residents propose that we do just that. And the fact that they're proposing them makes it clear to me that there's very little understanding by our residents exactly how collective bargaining works and how it ties our hands. The only way we can make changes to some of the salaries and benefits is through the process of negotiating with the unions. If the union doesn't want to agree to any particular changes, then and we can't come to agreement, it goes to binding arbitration. This is a lengthy process, and it involves the State Labor Board. The arbitrators assigned, one by the town, one by the union, and then one that they each pick, will ultimately decide what the benefits should be by comparing it to what all the other unions are receiving in different towns. So there's an inherent drive to make sure that no one ever makes adjustments, because then it will become the new standard by which the labor board looks to see what's correct and what's right. So as long as no one agrees to adopt any of these changes that helps us in terms of salaries and benefits, then it makes it very difficult to make that change. So to all of those residents who emailed us and said, well, you should change this, ultimately, we don't really have the power. And even when we do work with a union that is willing to work with us, it can still take a long time to make those changes. Currently, we are negotiating the police contract that expired June 30th, 2013. The police department is one of the largest components of the town's budget at almost $15 million a year we spend. But before we could make any progress on the 2013 contract, the union decided that they did not agree with the terms that had been negotiated in the previous contract. And so we again spent years going to arbitration, presenting evidence about how, yes, the union had agreed to those changes, and that was finally settled. So now we can start in 2000, we started in 2016, we're here in 2017, still trying to negotiate with that contract. So far, I haven't heard any positive comments that we're making progress in getting some of the changes that we need to see. I do want to point out that I have the utmost respect for our all of our police officers. They do a wonderful job in town. They are great public servants, but we just can't afford some of these benefits anymore. And these are things like in pensions, automatic cost of living increases for retirees. And how does that affect us? How does that affect our town when pensions are automatically increasing every year? If I look back 15 years ago, that annual required contribution to our pension was $1 million. This year it's going to be $21 million. Think about how many services we could be providing with that $21 million, that $20 million. So these automatic payroll increases each year means that our budget continues to grow automatically. We talk about discretionary spending versus non-discretionary. For us, there's very little that's actually discretionary in our budget because everything is just increased each year based upon our contracts. So one of the things that I would like to see is every single one of these contracts posted on our website so that residents could see exactly what it is that their taxes are paying for. How do we fix this? We need to end collective bargaining of public employee salaries and benefits. And the only way to do that is to elect people to the state legislature that are willing to vote for that change. There is an inherent conflict of interest in collective bargaining of public employee benefits, salaries and benefits, because those employees are also voters and they will pledge their support to whatever elected official will promise them those greater pay and benefits. It's no coincidence that the Speaker of the Connecticut House of Representatives is an employee of the American Federation of State, County, and and municipal employees' unions. So there is this relationship that governs all of our contracts, and it's really hard to blame others for this fiscal mess if we don't look at our process in the state and the people responsible for this. I think Mr. Privatera's comments about our budget really highlight how important it is to follow what's happening in our state legislature, because it's all of their decisions that have such an impact on our own budget. I am angry that our state legislature has brought us to this point, the point where our town manager has to question the very budget that he's proposing to us. The state legislature has squandered our future and our children's future and the great resources of this state. Their inability to govern and make the state fiscally sound has now cascaded down to the municipalities. Again, I'm going to say that the blame has to be shared by all those who continue to vote for people without doing their own due diligence and voting for people that don't have the talent or experience to do the job. Everyone seems to focus on social issues at the voting booth, but unless we have the money, we can't do the things that we would all love to do to support those social issues. I encourage everyone to do their homework. The League of Women Voters does a wonderful job of educating people on all the different candidates. I think people should ask, what is the candidate's educational and work background? What financial experience do they have? Have they ever worked in municipal government? Do they know what an unfunded mandate is? Unfortunately, too many of our representatives get elected because they are popular in town or because they have a certain party affiliation and not because of their qualifications. And I'm speaking for the entire state. I'm not trying to point anybody out in this town. So I'm just going to encourage people to do their research, vote for the best qualified candidate in the future, and then maybe the state is going to be in a position where they can start dealing with its problems and pass legislature that allows municipalities to control their own budget again. So that's definitely a little bit far afield from the actual numbers of our budget. And while this is not a reflection of the work that you have done and that our financial team has done, I will not support this budget because I feel that we're not tackling the future with it, and hopefully that no vote is a sign to people, and we can start having this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hall. Mr. Winograd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank my colleagues on Community Planning and Physical Services, Dallas Dodge and Chris Barnes. Also the staff we've worked with, Mark McGovern, John Phillips, Todd Dumais, Dwayne Martin, and of course our mayor, town manager, chief financial officer, the amazing work you've done on this budget. And I'll thank Ms. Hall for her comments as well. I echo them in terms of the work you've done. And you, along with all the other members of our council, are true public servants with whom I'm proud to serve. And that goes for everyone. As is becoming very obvious at the national level, budgets are moral documents. They show not just how much revenue is raised and spent, but they also reveal the priorities of those who write them, and hopefully, if we do our jobs right, of the nation or communities we represent. I believe this budget reflects the values of our residents, and therefore deserves to pass. This budget is progressive in its outlook, continuing to fund such initiatives as Complete Streets and energy conservation, as well as paying down debt and putting money into the pensions to to take care of the past promises we've made to our loyal town employees. It values our future by continuing to invest in our schools and libraries. I'm particularly pleased to know that to note that in the new budget, Faxon branch will be open on Fridays. Libraries are so essential to our community, and they should be as accessible as possible. Our budget is respectful of the debt we owe to our seniors, protecting senior centers, and keeping our streets safe. And it is intelligently and prudently accounts for the vagaries of the state budget while limiting tax increases as much as we could. We will continue to get good value for our money in West Hartford. I am proud of this budget and will vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Mr. Barnes.
Thank you. As is the tradition, I'd like to thank the entire team that worked on putting this budget together. It's been quite a road for the last, well, I know you guys work on it for 6 months leading into this period. For us, it's been the last 6 weeks or so, and in all the committee meetings we sit in and the questions that we have, you do a fantastic job pulling it together and providing us with the information. So I say thank you to my colleagues as well for their time going through this budget process as well. In past years, I've focused my remarks on specific numbers. We talk about unfunded liabilities and, you know, what our pension liabilities are and what our healthcare liabilities are and different spending that we do. But as this budget continued to move and the process, including, I think the ink is still dry on the paper that we received tonight, still wet, from the changes that have been made, I thought I'd take this opportunity to talk about the budget generally. A budget in the past and in our budget documents that would be conservative and free of one-time assumptions. But it's my opinion that this budget is not conservative, but instead risky for us here in town. So a combination of the governor's state budget proposals to cut town spending and to shift obligations in the form of the teacher's pension to West Hartford taxpayers and the town's own ever-increasing budget caused the town manager to propose just 6 weeks ago a budget that included a $25 million increase and approximately a 10% tax increase or property tax increase for our residents. And so while I was surprised at really, in the beginning, how few people actually came out and said, you know, that's outrageous. I was wondering where they all were. I just don't know if people are just kind of tuned out to the process, that they think that, you know, government's going to go on and the spending's going to go on, and they are resigned to the fact that a $25 million annual budget increase doesn't get people motivated to come out and voice their opinion. But from my perspective, this budget was an opportunity. It was a wake-up call. It was a time for us to get our fiscal house in order, to prepare for the long-term fiscal health of our town. Not only because our town spending, in my opinion, is way too high, but also because the state is in a permanent fiscal crisis that has and will continue to present challenges for us, as does the fiscal challenges facing the city of Hartford will also present challenges for us going forward as well. And so while we had this opportunity, unfortunately, we did not accept the challenge. Instead, despite historically using the governor's proposed budget as the basis for our town budget, town leadership has decided to disregard the governor's proposed budget in toto, including all of the proposed cuts and shifting of the obligations onto the town. We did this, I'm told, based upon the view of our state representatives and state senator and other state organizations that have assured us that the governor's budget is dead on arrival. And so, despite having ideas how to build a balanced budget or knowing what the state is going to do to be able to present a budget in the coming months, we have been assured that all of the state money that we've been promised in the past will come. And in fact, this town budget assumes that we're going to get more than $1 million over what we received last year. And so, to me, it's a risky decision because we have no idea what the state's going to do, what the state budget is going to look like, or the impact that it's going to have on our town. And in fact, Mr. Privatera mentioned it, that if some of these obligations are shifted to us, it could be catastrophic not only to our credit rating, our prized AAA credit rating, which we never, ever risk whenever it's come up in committee, but seems to be on the table this time, and also to the possibility of having to cut services or programs if such a budget were to pass. And we know that in conversations with our state representatives and senators in the past, we've been told that certain cuts wouldn't happen or certain monies would be there. I'm reminded of last year when we sat in a meeting talking about the shared tax revenue and the motor vehicle tax revenue, and we were assured that that money, in fact, was going to be in the budget and we would receive it, and we did not. So we did not get the motor vehicle tax money, and we got a reduced amount of sales tax money. And so I'm concerned, despite their assurances, that these monies will not find their way to our town. While the town has some reserved money set aside to address these cuts, as Mr. Privatera mentioned, it will likely not be enough. And even if it is this year, it sets the town up for a very difficult 2019 budget. And so in addition to adding the proposed cuts back into the budget, the town leadership has also included what I consider to be one-time assumptions in this budget. For example, there's a wage freeze presumed amounting to approximately $600,000 for certain contracts which have not been negotiated yet. We've removed the MDC reserve payment of approximately $1.8 million before the legislation has passed, or before the MDC has sent us an adjusted tax warrant from the MDC telling us that we don't have that obligation. And further, we're assuming $1.5 million in ECS money for the revenue side of our budget. To me, this being my fourth budget, these are things that I just don't recall happening in years past. A conservative budget was just that. It was a conservative budget. This, in my opinion, as I said, is a risky budget, and I expect influenced at least in part by the fact that this is an election year, and a $25 million budget increase is hard to defend in a campaign year. I understand that, but it's the tough choices that we need to make. And so I see this as a missed opportunity to make the structural changes needed to withstand the inevitable cuts in state revenue. And unfortunately, our town and our town budget is tied in some ways to the state budget. So I'm just briefly going to talk about the state. As many people know, or at least some people know, our legislative leaders are faced with closing a $3.6 billion budget gap in the upcoming biennial year budget. We learned yesterday that income tax revenue is down approximately 20%. It's like 20%. It's really hard to fathom, but it's off 20%, and that could increase the budget gap to approximately $4.2 billion. The current budget year is also running a deficit, and the state may have to borrow money to cover it because there's not enough money in the so-called rainy day fund. And so what the state is faced with are proposals like shifting the teacher's pension obligation to the towns. And this is simply one example of how poorly our state government is run. This pension was created in 1917, but has not been sufficiently annually funded until 2006. So 90 years it took to adequately annually fund this pension fund. And once the legislature did that, they decided that because of the severe underfunding, the state issued $2 billion in pension obligation bonds to get some money into that fund to be able to pay benefits. And as those bond payments increase, the state realizes that they don't have the money to make the payments. So the fund currently stands at about $13 billion deficit based upon approximately an 8% discount rate. And so if we used a 3 or 4% discount rate, that debt obligation is somewhere north of $40 billion. it also assumes that there are going to be a sufficient number of teachers paying into that fund at the rate of 6% going forward, and hasn't accounted for declining enrollment and the loss of teacher jobs, putting further pressure onto that pension fund. And that is why the governor is attempting to shift at least part of that obligation to the towns. And so if we assume that we would take on a 1/3 share of that liability, within the next 15 years, we'd be looking at $40 to $50 million annual payments just for that teacher pension contribution, and could be higher if the state decides to shift more of that obligation. And so it goes without saying that the towns cannot save the teacher pension fund, that it is up to the state to figure out a way to do that, because there's simply not enough property tax revenue to cover the liability. I must say, when I wrote this, it was shorter. So I don't know, like, if it just got longer, but I'm still going, like, a little bit left, but it's longer than I thought it would be. It is, it's just growing. I'm enjoying the moment. And so that's the state side of the equation and the challenges that presents to us. For the town's part, our budgets continue to rise beyond the means of many of our taxpayers. Our employee wages and benefits continue to increase. We continue to look at ways to cut services such as trash pickup to free up money to cover employee costs. We continue to increase our debt level, including tonight. If we decide to bond for the purchase of the Yukon property, we will see that number go up again. We face substantial challenges with respect to the funding levels in our pension and our health fund. And in the face of a $25 million budget increase, I've been surprised and disappointed by the response that we have received. The proposed cuts have included closing a senior center, a library, dial-a-ride, a town pool, and eliminate parking validation at the Noah Webster Library. But for the big drivers of our budget, right, not the items where we receive tons of emails from seniors that said, there are 1,000 of us that love the senior center, or the folks that have magazine clubs at Noah Webster Library, and we all got petitions in the mail with 65 signatures of people that say, I love going to the library, I go there every day, don't do away with this validation. You know, the shock that we would continue or pursue these items, we heard from those people, and they didn't want those cut. But for the big drivers of our budget, what did we hear? And from the school superintendent, Tom Moore, who did make cuts on his roll-forward budget in the face of declining enrollment, with respect to the other proposed cuts that the superintendent made on budget night, he said he could not support any one of them because it would materially change the education that we provide here in town. To the police chief, who was asked to propose $250,000 in cuts for our consideration, less than 0.5% of a $15 million budget, he said he could not find that $250 without making a material change to the way police services are delivered in our community. And I found it just shocking. With respect to the fire department, Mr. Privatera already added, we're going to add staff. So we're going to add a new assistant fire chief position in connection with the paramedic service. So while the school side eliminated 16 positions between teachers and staff, the fire department's adding personnel to their ranks. And the town proposed, among other things, to eliminate trash pickup. And so we're faced with many challenges here at the town and the state level, and our budgets must be conservative and sustainable to protect our taxpayers, and this budget is neither. We may not know where the next state cut will be, or the next unfunded mandate from the state, or the next impact from a fiscally challenged capital city, but we do know that they will come. And this budget, in my opinion, is a missed opportunity to address the fiscal challenges we face and prepare for the tough times to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me begin this evening by thanking our manager, Mr. Van Winkle, who prepared his last budget for the citizens of West Hartford. Sorry that it had to be this kind of situation that we're in, but it is, and as has been cited quite often, our finance team has always been cited as superior fiscal management as stated by Moody's and Standard & Poor's. So I'd like to extend a congratulations and kudos to our Finance Director, Peter Privatera, Liz Julia, and Barbara Wu for their hard work being at all our numerous committee meetings and providing us with the details and explanations as to the various items that are in the budget. As the chair of the Public Safety Committee, I'd like to thank Chief Gove and Chief Allen and their assistant chiefs for outlining the various line items and explanations as to what's covered in the various departments with respect to the items there. In more particular, we discovered that the cost that we charge for fingerprinting for those needing those services was low with respect to what other communities charge, and we were able to locate another additional $10,000 in potential revenue to our citizens. Now, with respect to the EMS coordinator position, as you're aware, the town recently went to being the first responder providing EMS services to our residents, which is a revenue generator. And as was documented during the recent public safety meeting, it's crucial that we have an EMS coordinator to go through the various case scenarios to make certain that we're doing them properly and well documented, so that going forward, any other things that may happen are they won't happen in case there's errors or omissions in that respect. So it's something that's proactive, and I think a wise decision on our part. I would not be able to sit here this evening or any of the days throughout the budget season if I didn't have the support of my family, so I do thank them, especially my wife and my daughters, as well as my sister, who's my business partner, who allows me to take time from work to do this. To all my colleagues, I know we've spent a lot of time together, and it's been quite interesting, and it always is interesting at budget time to hear the variety of things, and I thank everyone for putting their best foot forward. And to our mayor, I've said on several occasions, she leads the charge and has done so since day one, whether it be the MDC, finding a new town manager, or working on this budget. Sherry Cantor has given countless hours, 24/7, on behalf of the citizens of West Hartford at no pay. And for her efforts, they should not go unrecognized. And I don't think there's another member of our body who could have committed the time nor shown the dedication to do that. And our community is quite grateful for all your efforts, Sherry. This year was an interesting year. Despite grand list growth, because of smart growth decisions that we had, it didn't come to be enough dollars to meet the needs of our community. In addition to that challenge, we had revaluation, which is required every 5 years. So you got to think of all these different challenges we have. We have a state budget that, as of this hour, we have no idea as to what's in and what's out. But they'll come to a budget resolution some way or another, probably by September. But they'll get there. And to quote John F. Kennedy, let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future. So this evening, it's our responsibility to frame our priorities for our community. And this year in public safety, I approached the budget a little bit differently. It wasn't basically a roll forward budget. It was basically, are these services essential and necessary for our citizens? And that's how we approached it. And we heard the various things. And with respect to the potential cut of $250,000, the police chief explained that if we were to eliminate $250,000 from the police budget, we would be eliminating the CIT program, as well as possibly school resource officers and other things that our community has counted on with respect to services provided by our police department. And it was the belief of the majority of the people present at the meeting that that ought not be cut, because our residents do value those services which are provided by our Public Safety Department. Our town charter requires us to do a few things, and one of them is to adopt a budget. The other is to act as the chief zoning official, and something that I really enjoy. This is not as enjoyable, but it requires at least 5 votes. So somebody's got to govern. Some of us have to govern here and have to come up with a decision. We don't have the ability, all 9 of us, to say no, because if we don't get a majority vote, then the town manager's proposed budget would become the adopted budget of the council. Well, I'm certain nobody here would want a budget that imposes almost a 10% tax increase upon the taxpayers of West Hartford. As has been noted earlier this evening, the average taxpayer, and I think my home falls within that criteria. It's a home probably valued about $200 and could probably sell for $250,000. Would see a tax increase about 2.66%, so my taxes will probably go up a few $100s. And I think for what we have here in West Hartford, I think that's quite reasonable in light of what we have happening elsewhere. Now, let me talk about the process, because I think a lot of residents really don't understand what the process is. And the process is we have these committee meetings, we go through the various items, all the expenditures, all the revenues. We have hearings, and people have come out. We went over to Charter Oak. We heard from a lot of residents about the various components about the school budget. We've received more emails this year than I think any other year with respect to the town budget. And for the most part, a lot of us have had the ability to respond with our position and reasoning as to what our thoughts are. So I think this year, out of all the years, the citizens of West Hartford, in my personal opinion, were very engaged in the process, very much in control of what was happening, and I think social media played a part. They were on top of whatever proposed cuts were being discussed, and they contacted a lot of people who they voted for to ask them not to make those adjustments and to provide reasons as to why they felt those were valuable things. At my committee, I did ask for adjustments, and as the minority leader says, I do ask every year for adjustments, and I beg to differ that silence in a democratic process where you have the ability to offer suggestions as to ways to make adjustments to the budget ought to be aired, so you can have the ability to bring them forward, state the reasons why you're moving them, and demonstrate what your priorities are for the budget. And this way we can find out what they are, if they differ from the ones that we have identified in the budget that's going forward here this evening. In my opinion, the community of West Hartford has strong values for a strong educational system. And as Ben Franklin once said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And Ben Franklin's my favorite person in history, and I think he's spot on there. The other things that are important to our community is a strong public safety department. When residents dial 911, they anticipate that someone will be there for either a life-threatening emergency, a fire, or whatever other activity that may be necessary with the law enforcement. And the last part of our community is we tend to value quality of life issues. And our residents enjoy senior centers, libraries, parks, recreational opportunities. So those are the things that make West Hartford what it is. Those are the things that make West Hartford the best place to live, work, and raise a family. That's the quote we hear at election time, and those are the things that people want us to preserve. This budget preserves those. They preserve our excellent school system, our fire, our police, our EMS, our libraries, our senior centers, our parks, our recreation, our streets. Those are things that our community has said, those are important. Protect them. I'm willing to pay for those. I'm willing to support those. Now, we had a little discussion about trash. And there was a discussion as to whether or not the current system was sustainable. And we looked at a pay-as-you-throw system. And we're not going forward with that this evening. But I have one request of our residents. If you can help us and help me understand why there needs to be so much trash thrown in that green barrel, there really doesn't need. You need to find ways to recycle more. So my mantra is, less in the green saves us more green. Okay? And I think that's so important. Let me say it again. Less in the green saves us more green. And if we get that opportunity, we'll find other ways to find recyclable opportunities out there so that trash does not consume so much in our budget. So what do we do here as elected officials? We have to balance. We have to balance what's in the best interest of our community. Those on fixed income, those with young families, those who've raised their families here, those in our business community. And on balance here, when you look at the big picture, I think we've done a great job with what we have in the environment we have this evening. I think we need to be positive. I think West Hartford is a great place to live. I think West Hartford is a great place to call home. We have volunteers in our community who do so much. And as Ronald Reagan says, we can't help everyone, but everyone can help someone. So this evening I ask, if you've got extra time, help those who may be less fortunate in our community. Find a way to make a difference in their world, one individual at a time. Those things will be something that make our community a much more positive, a brighter way to end our day. I always say that West Hartford's brightest days are ahead of us, because I think optimism is a very valuable thing, and it gets you very far. And I'll conclude with a quote from Helen Keller. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. This evening, I ask all of our West Hartford residents to be optimistic, to have faith in your elected leaders, to do what's right for our community. I'm certain that that's how I've seen my role in the 10 years that I have served on this town council. I know others who are here are motivated by the same beliefs for that. And remember that all politics are local, and all priorities on a local basis are decided right here. And this evening, our budget that we're going to adopt this evening outlines this community's priorities for the year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Ms. Kerrigan?
Thank you, Mayor. I admit, Denise, I did not know what an unfunded mandate was either until I became on town council. And someone needs to do something and put some type of cap on that, because that is crazy making. Thank you, Ron. You're just fabulous. Peter, Liz, Barbara, helping us navigate our way through the finances. You show incredible in-depth understanding of every single line item that we ask about. It blows me away. Especially thanks to Helen Rubino Turco, who's the head of Parks and Recs, as I like to say, as well as Human Services. Mayor Cantor, the amount of time, the energy, the understanding of this budget, it blows me away. I am so impressed, and your leadership is invaluable. No doubt, we were dealt a bad hand. And we were like one of the 139 municipalities that was dealt, a bad hand. But you have to play your hand as you're dealt it. And not only were the state was decreasing the money that they were going to give us, but they were also giving us an additional bill to pay, which was the teacher's pension. So I do want to applaud the leadership here who said no, that we will not take on the teacher's pension. A liability that will grow exponentially. It will erode our AAA bond rating, and it will destroy our town. So I want to thank you for having the courage to say no, not on our backs, find another way, and also for trusting that our leadership in the state will make us whole. So thank you. It takes a lot of courage. I'm proud of this budget, and it's easy to say no. It's easy because nobody wants to raise taxes. Republicans don't, Democrats don't, managers don't, constituents don't, the town employees, nobody likes to pay more for something. But two things you need to keep in mind. One is that all things being equal, we don't have a tax increase this year. We were given less money. So kudos to us, but not the state. But when we say no to this budget, this is what we're saying no to. We're saying no to the family that depends on full-time kindergarten when they did their planning. We're saying no to the seniors who go to the senior center, to add value to their life, that also add value to the children that they're reading to. We're saying no to the residents who go to the library either because they need the services to help them do their school projects, they need use of the internet because they cannot afford it at home, or they are the retired individuals, part of the New Yorker Club, which I'd never heard of, but I'm looking forward to that, who deserve free public library, including parking. If we say no to this budget, we're saying no to Great by 8, where a father stood in a crowd of strangers and cried, testifying the value, the difference that Great by 8 made in his life. We're saying no to Hillcrest area neighborhood outreach that was born out of a social worker and a psychologist in our own schools that provides a safety net for those that are struggling in our town. We're saying no to programs like ASK, those that are most at risk, those that are most vulnerable. We're saying no to pools, to the kids that need them the most because they don't have a place at the shore and they don't take vacations. And that difference that pool makes is the difference between a fun summer or a sucky summer. If we say no, we're saying no to all those who chose West Hartford because of its quality of life. We're saying no to all the residents that came to protect not just their trash delivery, but came to protect the life of every other resident in West Hartford. And I was so moved at all the residents that came out to talk, not about their kids, not about their neighbors, not about themselves, but about other kids, others' neighbors. That's what West Hartford is. We care about others, and we're willing to pay for that. We're saying no to a quality of education that Conard was just ranked number 6 in the state and made the top 500 in the United States, a quality of education which is the reason why most individuals, including myself and many here, chose to live, because we wanted that quality of education. And I'm not going to mention why Hall wasn't on the list. No doubt we have our challenges, and I couldn't agree more with most of what Denise Hall spoke about. Because what I'm learning is it's easy to say this needs to change, but making that change happen is so difficult. As Rick Ledwith will attest to, there's the contracts, there's the negotiations, there's the mediators, there's the arbitrators, and at the end of the day, you can still get the short end of the stick. He has worked hard understanding where we need to go, but sometimes his hands are tied, and I don't know how to change that. On a bright note, I do believe that Senator Bai and Representative Slapp passed a bill which is going to help us so we don't have to take on unpaid bills from the MDC, no matter what the municipality is. I do believe we're working hard towards correcting the ad valorem, which is unfair to West Hartford residents. That's going to stay on our radar screen. But I do think we need to have an eye towards revenue. Though I will say I'm a little concerned about an eye towards revenue when the president of our country prides himself on paying so little. That being said, I think we all need to understand growing our grand list is great. Perhaps the Yukon is an opportunity there, but we need to keep looking at any other place we can have economic development. So I will support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kerrigan. Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We're getting close to the midnight budget, so I'll be as brief as I can. First off, like everyone else said, thank you, Ron. Pat, thank you for your counsel throughout the process. Thank you to Pete, Privatera.
Don't thank me so soon. I just looked at the numbers again and I was off by a day. You could actually go till midnight tomorrow.
Okay.
I apologize.
Well, the thanks.
There's one hanging day on the calendar in April that I missed.
The thanks stands. Liz Hewlett, Barbara Rua, Rick Ledwith, and all the town managers, thank you. To my colleagues, thank you for all time. As a resident, respect your service. And though I disagree with the majority of you most of the time, I agree with some of you some of the time. So, Deputy Mayor, I'm going to start with a quote. I know you had 4, I have 1. You're all here because you've been entrusted to make very difficult choices, and you're not always going to make the right one. You're not gonna always be popular. And some decisions that you make, you'll get heavily criticized for. And if you are afraid of criticism, then you shouldn't be in here. And that's by Gino. You know. From my perspective, I believe that this budget fails to make the difficult choices necessary to keep West Hartford vibrant and affordable. Mr. Winograd referenced morality earlier. And from my perspective, this budget lacks compassion because it reflects a policy of choosing not to fix West Hartford's fundamental problems, which cause an ever-increasing tax burden on our residents. And instead, it reflects a decision to keep things as they are, even in light of the state's dire economic condition, and a guarantee that next year will be worse. Moreover, we are keeping the status quo, even though all 9 of us have acknowledged that West Hartford is increasingly becoming unaffordable. Yet, this budget does absolutely nothing to change that trend. There has been a lot of talk tonight about the state and how the state's decisions have adversely impacted our town, and that is true. But at the end of the day, the state is not a viable scapegoat for this budget. The state is not responsible for taking care of the municipal budget of West Hartford. We are. That's what we are elected to do, and in my opinion, this budget doesn't do that. But don't just take my word for it. Let's look at facts. 2003, our budget was $158 million, and our school budget was $90 million. Fast forward today, our town budget is now $285 million. Our school budget is a staggering $160 million. In other words, our town budget has increased $127 million over just 15 years, or an astounding 80%. Now, over that same period of time, our town population has remained flat. And despite the increase in our school budget, the number of students attending our schools has decreased. And yet, now stunningly, we have approximately 150 more employees at our schools than we did in 2003. Moreover, our own school administration is, quote, projecting an average decline of 128 students per year for the next 10 years. To give that number context, it's about 15% of our student population. So, despite a flat town population and declining enrollment, our spending trends are upwards. This defies common sense. These numbers and trends, in my opinion, are the result of one-party rule. Union contract after union contract has been approved at the taxpayer expense. And as a result, our town budget has been held hostage to unfavorable terms that go unchecked. Yes, there are some wage freezes contemplated in this budget, but a wage freeze does not address the long-term issues that these contracts present us. Our own state government, led by its Democrat governor, has even fallen in line with the national trajectory of pushing for union concessions, yet we do not do the same. Concessions and union givebacks were not raised in this budget and are apparently a non-starter with our unions. I would like to take issue with the idea that the Republican caucus did not propose any cuts to this budget. In fact, what the Republican caucus did raise was asking for givebacks from all 21 of our, I believe it's 21, of our collective bargaining unions. And that is the thing that will make West Hartford affordable. So the Republican caucus did the very thing to fix the issue that drives our budget. So the idea that we didn't play a role in advocating for substantive change in a different policy direction is not true. It's inaccurate. And and to that end, our largest union, the school teachers, refused to consider a wage freeze, which adds $3 million to our budget alone this year and another $3 million to next year's budget. When I raised issue with the teacher union's position at a recent meeting, I was told that our teachers, who do wonderful work, are underpaid compared to other regional systems. Yet here is a fact. West Hartford pays near the top of our region, just 3% shy of the top for teachers with graduate degrees. That is why 91% of our teachers have graduate degrees. That's good. We want to encourage a wonderful system, which my children will be attending in the coming years. But we have to balance our desire to have good schools with the declining enrollment and the economic realities of our residents. This budget fails to do that, and it fails to do that because doing so is politically unpopular. This body uses fear to discuss our budget instead of prudence. At this budgetary season's genesis, the public was presented with a plethora of potential cuts, as Councilwoman Kerrigan cited, cutting full-day kindergarten, closing senior centers, closing libraries, all one-time cuts which fail to address any of the underlying budgetary fundamentals, which actually cause our budget to be ever expanding and, to be clear, have been consistently raised by Councilwoman Hall, Councilman Barnes, and myself throughout this budgetary process. But these proposed cuts were never serious proposals, and they were never truly considered by this body. But what they did do was incite fear in our residents. We all got the emails from the seniors. We got the emails from people, from young parents who had to know, because both parents work, whether or not there's going to be full-day kindergarten next year. It's very scary for them. But what it did do was render the inevitable tax increase that would come with this budget more palatable. With this budget, our town is now saddled with a 41.04 mill rate. That mill rate, to be clear, puts us in league with New Haven, New London, and Norwich. Think about those municipalities and their economic health. That is exactly where West Hartford is headed if we do not turn things around. I encourage the people of West Hartford to use their common sense and ask themselves whether our budget trends make sense. Please ask yourself whether these budgetary trends reflect the most effective and efficient use of your hard-earned money. And if you do that, I think you will answer no. I think this body can do better. In fact, we must. We need change, and I believe West Hartford's future depends upon it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I'd like to thank the town staff, especially Ron Van Winkle and Pete Privatera, for your tireless work on this budget and putting it together under circumstances that were difficult and certainly not of your making. I'd also like to thank my fellow councilors. This has been a learning experience for me in my first year, and I'd particularly like to thank Mayor Cantor for her patience with me and for being willing to answer all of my rookie questions. I will be voting in favor of this budget. I believe that it responsibly deals with the problems created by uncertainty at the state level while protecting the core services that make our town a national model for excellence. Throughout this process, I've been driven by what drew my wife and I here, what drew my wife and I back home to raise our two children. Like many other young families, we chose West Hartford because of the world-class education and the opportunity for our kids to go to school amongst one of the most diverse student populations of any suburb in Connecticut. We chose West Hartford because of the outstanding libraries, the beautiful parks, its vibrant town center, its safe neighborhoods. These services, that quality of life, it's protected by this budget. And finally, when we look at how the budget is financed, I think it is important to consider services used by all residents that are not paid for by many of our peer towns. For instance, sewer services in particular account for more than $1 million of our tax assessment, and yet the MDC is the only water utility in the state that is paid through the imposition of an ad valorem tax on municipalities. This is a critical issue that must be addressed so that MDC member towns, including West Hartford, can remain competitive. And I thank Mayor Cantor for her work on that issue, and I hope that you will continue with our new town manager to push the MDC to move away from an ad valorem system and to move to a user fee system like almost every other water utility in the country. And so again, I think that I'd like to thank the town staff for their work in crafting this budget. I think it's a responsible budget, and I look forward to supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Ms. Casperson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I echo our thanks to you for your timeless energy, dedication, and advocation for all of us in West Hartford. I think that thankfully you're an Energizer bunny who runs marathons, or you would not have made it through these last 6 months of enduring all these challenges. I'd like to thank Ron Van Winkle, Pat Allaire, town staff, Jared Morin, and Catherine DeVinny, who I work with. Liz and Barbara, thank you as well as Peter. Thank you so much for being there and answering all of our questions and presenting things in a way that everyone at the table can understand. For me, this has been the most difficult budget season in my 8 years on the council. We in West Hartford have been listening to our residents, some of who said, raise my taxes, others who say, please don't, I can't afford to live here. And prior to the state shortfalls with ECS and the teacher's pension plan proposals and the Hartford's MDC ad valorem impact, our goal to our residents is always to help maintain taxes and a standard of living that we can afford. As many know, I moved here for the schools. I understand the focus and benefit of our strong educational system. And as many have said, when we threaten to, or people hear that we are thinking about cutting services, there's an uproar. Our focus is here in the town council is not to take away services. We're here because we love the town and we only want to make it better. And with that, I want to thank my town councilors, my team, that we all bring something to the table. And it's appreciated by all those who voted for us, being able to hear those things. With that being said, I don't like the idea that we've had to react to the state's budget and have to entertain cutting the services that we've had to cut, that we've had to think about cutting in such a short time frame. But I think as we are looking at declining enrollment and other difficulties, that we're going to have to think about that in the future and work together as a team with input from all sides to really move this forward, instead of suggesting that we could have made cuts or we should have done things. Let's make the plan. Let's do it together. Let's do something for the next budget where we can make thoughtful decisions that the town can support because we support it and we've gone into it with that kind of planning. I think that that's what we do in a thoughtful planning West Hartford. So I think we do have some difficult choices ahead. And I think that we can do it together. Our public safety is not one that I take for granted. I'm thankful every day that I live in West Hartford. I can take a walk anytime, day or night, and feel really good about that. We have our police, fire, and paramedics that are there at the drop of a hat. And they're feared and revered by every community in the state of West Hartford, in the state of Connecticut. With all that being said, we still have to govern. We have to make a decision to keep our town moving forward. So we must consider the state's budget impact to West Hartford while living today, planning for tomorrow, and managing for our future. And with that, I will be supporting our budget this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Casperson. So I'm gonna, I have enough time. I'm teasing, I won't. I want to start by thanking Mr. Van Winkle for an incredible job. February 8th, when the governor announced his budget, I really thought you were going to keel over it and I was going to lose it. It was a really upsetting day. That's not that long ago. And there was a lot has happened since that day, but we have anyway, so I'll go on with that, but thank you so much. Peter, same thing. I mean, it's been, I've really pestered these guys like no tomorrow, and they've been incredibly supportive. This has really been this has been hard on all of us. There's no question. Major decisions can't be made, as Mrs. Casperson was just saying, under such pressure. You can't make strategic decisions that quickly. And that's what I resent, I think, most of all, is that we weren't brought to the table early on to say that this is coming. Let's talk about it 6 months out. Let's plan on how to handle, what to do. So that's where I'm probably most frustrated. Well, I'm frustrated on a lot of levels. Thank you to Liz and Barbara, and your professionalism is unparalleled. Rick, and your work that you've done on behalf of the town for so many years, I'm very, very appreciative. I also want to thank the superintendent of schools. I also want to thank Pat Allaire and Kimberly for their work. Mark McGovern was here. Helen Rubino-Turca was here. I also want to thank the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education. When the news came out, we talked to Tom immediately and said, this can't be business as usual, and everybody has to reel things in. He cut $2.1 million from his budget. He cut 16 positions. That's a school. That's Morley School. So there was a lot done right away in quick time. There was not the ability to be as strategic. So then became the laundry list of what ifs. What if that $14.5 million? And I'm going to go on a little bit more about that. The same thing with Mr. Van Winkle did a similar exercise in cutting $1 million. And to say it's roll forward, it's not roll forward. We have a lot of cuts in here. So a lot of work has been done and went into that. But the Board of Education they listened to a lot of people and made some difficult decisions. They didn't want to cut that $2.1 million. But they knew it was in the best interest. They took another $250,000 on top of that, and we cut another $300,000 on top of that. So it's $2.6 million in a very short very short period of time. Again, once the budget hit, so I want to again thank them for their work. Once the budget hit, I spent a lot of time at the LOB testifying before Education Appropriations and GA, and we also had many discussions with leadership in other neighboring towns, CCM and CROG. What are people doing? What should we do? We all recognize the severe financial condition of the state of Connecticut. There is, CCM came out with a study about the lack of diversification in town revenue. One of the reasons that our property taxes have gone up is because the lack of other revenue has gone down. And so that is the place where we filled the hole. And so it's unfair to just take that number and project it out. That is not, it's the whole situation and how things have changed. There is an understanding that property tax is a tax. I'm afraid that not everybody gets that the shift to municipalities does increase taxes, and property taxes are regressive. Connecticut has one of the highest property taxes. The state economy grew 17% between 2006 and 2015, but the expenditures in that same period grew 49%. Local general government for the state of Connecticut, actually, the expenditures ranked 50 out of all states, if you exclude K through 12. So there's not a lot of spending on local general government. So that's something we need to think about. So this budget that the state decided to issue that had severe cuts to ECS, and it was really after a year where we were under 50% funded. Finally, there was legislation that brought us to 53%. We received a bump in ECS. We were at 53%. We've been underfunded since the inception of this grant for 19 years. As we became more diverse, as we had to spend more money on counseling services and school security, that is not reflected in the classroom, but we had to, after Sandy Hook, do certain things that we needed to do. If we didn't do that, we would have been negligent. So many resources had to go to the schools, yes, where populations were declining, but there were needs that were never identified or addressed before. And so that was really critical. So our pillars are safety, public safety. When we talk about that, the paramedic going in the paramedic coordinator going into the budget, the chief position, we eliminated a $300,000 contractual program where we received $1.5 staff paramedic or 2 during the day, 1.5 at night. We went to 5 in 5 locations throughout the town at a reduced cost. If we don't protect that program, it's going to fail. So that was an important investment. So I don't want that to be cavalier in any way. So we looked at everything. We had to look at everything. Everything had to be on the list when we were talking about $25 million. Then in the meantime, while we were doing that, we were talking about what is realistic. What do we want to what are other communities doing, and what is important that we include or exclude. We tried to be as flexible as possible with staying without doing draconian cuts when we don't know what's going to happen. So what we wanted to do is make sure we had a place where if we don't need that money, after we've done and not a roll forward budget, but a reduced budget by almost $4.5 million between the town and the Board of Education, expenses that were cut, that we had the ability to give money back to our taxpayers if that opportunity were to be allowed us. West Hartford is unique. I'm just going to step back a little bit. We are an inner ring suburb. We have issues and challenges that other communities around us do not have. We can't be compared to Avon and Farmington and Simsbury and Glastonbury. It's not the same. We just don't have the same dynamic. We know we have 70 languages spoken in our schools. We have, we all know we sit in public safety. We all know we sit on a city that has real safety challenges. We have top-notch police that are incredibly focused and actually leaders in the country in implicit bias and many other challenges that police officers face. We are really in a position where, we're almost alone. There's nobody to compare us to. We are 128 out of 169 in per pupil spending. So if we are the only ones that are going up like this, that wouldn't be the case. Everybody's rising. There's a reason for it. Again, a lot of it, I think, is shifts from other sources, but also from the fact that the needs have increased for our school population. A more diverse school system, a more dangerous environment for all of our schools in general, and more at risk in counseling services. Our communities picked up this burden for all of these years. And again, I thought with 53% funding in ECS, we were going to be in a better shape. We have nearly 10,000 students, 43% come from a diverse background. 2,000 speak other languages than English at home. We spend 11% on special ed. 11% of our student population are special ed students. 1/4 qualify for free and reduced lunch, and we've had a 9% increase in our special education students. Yet 70% of our students take AP classes. We are poster children for what a diverse school population does for their students and should not be penalized for that, and that's what we're fighting for at the state level. There are no other scenarios quite like ours. There are not. People choose homes that are more expensive in our community than neighboring communities because they want to be in a diverse community. They want the vibrancy and the diversity. But there are breaking points, there's no question. We did win Money Magazine 15th Best Places to Live in Small Cities. 16,000, there's 16,000 communities that fit in the pool of 50,000 to 300,000. We were chosen out of a pool of 823. Rockledge just won 2. So it's way more than just the schools. We have an incredibly highly engaged citizenry. We were just at the opening day for West Hartford youth baseball and Little League. The amount of energy and commitment and what our community values is, again, unique. We're very, very, very lucky. We have been stable, and we have been predictable, and we've had a plan. A lot of the root of our situation with the pension program and even healthcare is the lack of funding between 1991 and It was 1991 to 2002. We did the same thing the state did. We made no contributions to our pension plan. And not only did we not make a contribution to our pension plan, our employees didn't make a contribution to their pension plan. That was a liability that just started to escalate out of control. Once double-digit inflation stopped and we didn't have tax increases, we're all paying for that now in a big way. It's very similar to the position that the state is in. And we need to make sure that we understand that. And there's nothing we can do about old obligations that we've had already. We can negotiate our way out of anything. We can do complete DC plans and do all that. That obligation, that liability is still going to grow at a rapid rate. And we've got to meet that liability. Just like we said to the state, you created it, you pay for it. This was not me, but my predecessors made the decision to do this for whatever reason, and we have to pay for it. That was the decision that was made. Those were different times, but we've got to do it. That is a huge driver. MDC is a huge driver. Those are things that we have to address, and we are working with MDC to try to make the ad valorem system either obsolete, it is obsolete, or to figure that out. So we've also had a shift from autos to real estate. So that's also affected our mill rate as well. When you don't get if the state money doesn't come in, like it last year, those things are going to affect us. We don't get any money. I know Mr. Van Winkle, this is sort of a pet peeve for him. Dog licenses, we get $1. We pay for more than we get. Liquor permits, we get $2. Those are expensive for us liquor permits especially, for us to administer and to then regulate and to police. That is an important piece. We just don't get that back. When we talk about, I'm just going to go back to the pension for one more minute. We paid $1.1 million in 2003, $21.6 million in 2017. Our obligation went up 700. Well, is it no? Like 2,000%. Whatever, but 200%. I'm sorry, but the point actually in 1987, the previous highest payment was $3.5 million. We also had a discount rate of 8.5% all the way through that time frame. We've addressed a lot. Again, this is going to be increasing a little bit, but then it will go down. We have a plan. That's why we are AAA bond rated by Moody's and Standard & Poor. I'm jumping around a little bit, but I just want to get back to the fact that if we were held stable with the state at a 53% funded ratio for ECS and not take on the state's obligation for teacher pension, we would have no tax increase. But because that's not the case, because we cut $4.5 million out of our budget, the rest, the contracts that were open, we asked for a freeze. The contracts that weren't open, we didn't open because we knew we would have to make other concessions. So that was a strategic decision. Nothing was ignored, nothing was put under the table, but that was the situation. We also cut CNRE, we also cut capital. We had hiring freezes as well as a freeze on all expenses throughout the town, which created a little bit, we hope, a surplus for this year to help offset some instability in next year's budget. We also, I do want to thank our legislators for fighting for us, to getting us to 53% in ECS. That was a $2.8 million increase, for fighting for the science labs to take out $3 million of capital expense on a 50-year-old science lab that we needed to update for safety reasons. They ended up getting more reimbursement for that. So I want to make sure that I thank them for that. The bottom line is, what we have been able to control without giving up our pillars and what people value in this community, we've carved, we've trimmed, we've delayed, we have put off, we've done all we can do. We do have big strategic decisions to make going forward. It looks like the state budget is going to be, if not the same, potentially worse. We know we're going to get affected. We've built in some of that into our budget. If it doesn't meet what we have there now, we have a plan, and we will get there. But that's 1 year. If this is an ongoing obligation and challenge, we're going to have to strategically come back together, figure out how we can provide services more efficiently, and make some dramatic changes to our community. But that needs input, strategic input from all of us. So I am not going to quote Helen Keller or Reagan or Kennedy. I'm going to quote Shaquille O'Neal, because I'm 4'11". But Shaquille O'Neal calls himself Big Aristotle. And he said, excellence is not a singular act, it's a habit. You are what you repeatedly do. What we've repeatedly done is invest in our pillars of strength. It has made our community a success. We're vibrant, we're safe, we are a magnet for education, and our community treasures the resources that we have here. Shaquille also said, I never worry about the problem, I worry about the solution. So the problem is the problem. Whatever we're dealt, we're gonna deal with it for this 1 year. Going forward, we are gonna have to take more than 6 weeks to figure out a strategic plan and how we navigate our community, preserve the best of our community going forward, and meet the needs of everybody. So thank you so much, and with that, we will do a roll call vote. Ms. LeBreau?
Okay, you're going to vote on item number 6.
Yes, we need to do them separately, but we read them all in, so we can you can just.
Okay, Mr. Barnes?
No.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Ms. Casperson?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Mr. Dodge?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
No.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
No.
It is adopted. And number 7, Mr. Barnes?
No.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Ms. Casperson?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Mr. Dodge?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
No.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
No.
It is adopted. Number 8, Mr. Barnes?
No.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Ms. Casperson?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Mr. Dodge?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
No.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
No.
It is adopted. And number 9, Mr. Barnes?
No.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Ms. Casperson?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Mr. Dodge?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
No.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
No.
It is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. Number 10, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of a resolution authorizing year-end budgetary transfers.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Mr. Van Winkle, this is very, just we do this annually.
Madam Mayor, it's an accounting thing we do toward the end of each fiscal year. It allows us to balance out our books correctly. So we're just asking you to do it again.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Oh, we don't have to do a roll call on that, right? No. Okay, motion carries. I make a motion that we adjourn?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Good night.